Welcome to Raging Bullets, a DC Comics fan podcast, episode 154. Welcome to Raging Bullets. I'm Sean Wang, Dr. Norge on the comics forums, and I'm joined as always by my co-host Jim. You gotta be kidding me! Green, yellow, red, blue, violet? It's like Walt Disney threw up! What the hell's going on out there? So says the Sensei of the Whatnot, Segulin.
How's it going, eh?
In Speeding Bullets, obviously one of the things I definitely want to talk about is Green Lantern Corps number 34 and the ever-eloquent Guy Gardner.
Yeah. Dude, man, I'm polishing up my ring. I'm getting ready.
Well, that's great stuff.
Yeah.
We are proud members of the Comics Podcast Network and the League of Comic Book Podcasts. Our sponsors for this episode, DCBService.com and InStockTrades.com, where you can pick up Flash Rebirth number 2, written by Jeff Johns, art by Ethan Van Sciver, covers by Ethan Van Sciver. What's happened to the Speed Force? One of the world's most powerful speedsters is dead, and Barry Allen must discover who or what is responsible. But the reborn Barry is a man haunted by a dark secret in his past, a secret that drives him to push far beyond his limits, a burden that, if he's not careful, could send him right back into oblivion. Jeff Johns and Ethan Van Sciver's reinvention of the Scarlet Speedster picks up the pace, and we dare you to keep up. Regularly $2.99, 40% off, only $1.79, and the variant cover is available for people who want to pick that up for $15. So it's nice for anybody who likes to collect the variants as well. Also available, we were continuing to support the Comic Book Podcast Companion by Tomorrow's Publishing. The writer Eric Houston is basically doing a interview segment series with some of the most popular comics podcasts out there. And there is a directory in the back also of a whole bunch of comics podcasts. It's really great. It's $9.57, and I pre-ordered that. I definitely want to check that out. So it's going to be some great stuff. Whatever your shipping preferences, whatever your bag and boarding preferences, DCBService.com accommodates your collecting needs. Jim, InStockTrades.com is where we get our Rage of the Month. And it's been a while since we've done the contest. We want to get through some of our other content beforehand. RagingContest@gmail.com is the email address. Please send us your website content, articles, reviews, where's what not nows, comic strips if you want to make them, banners, fan art, really any creative ideas you can come up with. Just shoot me an email and just say, hey, Sean, I got an idea. Can I throw this up on the site? You know, that's where Life in the Gutter came from, for example, that art, which is wonderful. We get one of those every week from Super Mandy from the forums. So, and, you know, we got Mart's blog we're linked to and all kinds of other stuff like that. We want your content on the website. So anything you want to chat about or rant about, please send it to ragingcontest@gmail.com and you'll be entered. The grand prize? You pick the content for the episode. So go to InStockTrades.com and check out their wonderful selection and look for that trade that you might want to do on the show with us, because we would love to have you on and do a full-blown segment cover to cover. I love doing those, actually.
Yeah, they're a fun time because
the Flash was great.
It mixes things up, gives us something, you know, a little bit different to talk about and whatnot.
We are still going to be doing Absolute Batman The Long Halloween. That's coming up. We're going to get through the Watchmen episodes. We've got Art Lions couple episodes, and then we're going to jump into Long Halloween right afterwards, because I definitely want to chat about that one. So that's still coming. We haven't forgotten it. We just got a whole bunch of content prior to then. I also saw Batman Chronicles Volume 7. Are you getting any of these? These are the reprintings of them?
I haven't been pre-ordering them, and yeah, I sit there and I kind of kick myself for not getting them. Then I'm like, yeah, I want to, I don't want to. And I don't know, I think probably what's going to end up happening is I'm going to borrow one of yours, I'll read it, then hop on In-Stock Trades and buy all the ones I didn't get.
Yes, I've been getting them as they come out. I've been getting the Superman ones and the Batman ones. They're chronological reprintings. And, you know, they just did the Green Lantern one.
Yeah.
They're chronological reprintings of every Batman story from the 1940s. And this particular one, Volume 7, collects Batman 12 and 13, plus stories from Detective Comics 66 to 70 and World's Finest Comics number 7. It's regularly $14.99, 37% off, only $9.44. And it's Don Cameron, Bill Finger, Jack Schiff, and Joseph Green, Bob Kane, Jerry Robinson, Jack Burnley, and others. Full color. So for anybody that's maybe the showcase isn't their cup of tea because it's in black and white, these are full color reprints in chronological order. So InStockTrades.com offers free shipping of orders for $50 or more, has tons of collected editions ready to ship. So thank you for supporting us, DCBService.com and InStockTrades.com. And consider joining into that contest, because we'd love to get you on the show. Our sponsor for this episode is Lords of Justice, the action-packed superhero anthology published by Altered Dimensions, featuring original stories by Michael Boatman, Brian Lee Hitchcock, Robert Orm, and Kevin G. Summers. Lords of Justice is a thrill-packed ride through the world of masks, capes, and high-tech gear that will keep you turning the pages till the end and leave you wanting more.
My name is Jared Weiss. I am the Paladin. You may have read some newspaper stories last year about my war on crime. They're exaggerations, mostly. Apparently, a masked vigilante in a Washington, D.C. suburb isn't enough to sell newspapers. Well, let me set the record straight. I don't have superpowers. I can't fly or bend steel with my bare hands or move things with my mind. I'm not the bored son of a billionaire trying to make some excitement in my life, and I'm not doing this to try to market a new superhero concept to DC Comics. Why am I doing this? Because somebody has to. Because gangs are moving into the suburbs, and the kids are getting hooked on drugs every single day. Because what those kids really need is somebody to look up to. They need a hero, and that's exactly what I want to be.
Whether you're a fan of comics, superheroes, or just action-packed adventure tales, add Lords of Justice to your reading list. Lords of Justice is available from Amazon.com, BarnesandNoble.com, and CyberWizardProductions.com. And we'll have direct links to those right on our website, and in the show notes. So definitely check that out. I'm very interested to check this out.
Yeah, I know. I want to check this thing out.
You didn't say super flowers.
No, I didn't.
When Jim was practicing, he slipped up and said super flowers. I deliberately didn't look at you. Did you notice that?
Yeah.
Because I knew, I'm like, oh, he'll slip up if I do that. So, Jim, we have a voicemail line, and we're going to have some voicemails on this episode. It's 1-440-388-4434 or Dr. Norge on Skype. Jim, what kind of a podcast are we?
Well, Sean, we are a spoiler podcast. We go in-depth into plot lines, story twists, and whatnot of the comics we're reviewing. So if we're going over something you haven't read, you may want to come back later so you can better enjoy the show.
Jim, let's go ahead and jump into a speeding bullets segment. Then also on this episode, we're going to do the first of a two-part heavy dissection of the Watchmen film. We got to see it again together over this past weekend, which I really had a blast with. I gotta say, seeing it with you this time was really a lot of fun. There were a lot of those, hell yeah moments where it was.
We
really
had some
nice.
high five moments going on in the theater,
and it was one of those things because knowing you had read it, that was a great shared experience. It was also my chance for my wife to see it for the first time, so we had some of her reactions when you and I were chit chatting over this. This will be a lot of fun to talk about. Jim, I want to talk first about Green Lantern number 33. We haven't talked about the Green Lantern books in a while, and I really wanted to chat about these because they have been so awesome lately.
I know. Core and Lantern are just really... I'm sitting here and, at home, I'm reading these things. I went back through, and if you haven't done this, I highly recommend go back through, just... read the entire, Rage of the Red Lantern. Read all these things, just boom, 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 right in a row. I was so jazzed up. I'm like, I was sitting there, I'm polishing up my ring, getting ready to go, because I'm just like, this thing is just this, it's a runaway freight train just coming at you. And it's not just even about solely Blackest Night, which is going to be a really awesome story. Mm-hmm. It's about this intrigue that is going on inside the Green Lantern Corps. They're shaking up to its politics. Foundation. Yeah. And I'm just like, wow, this is a really just a multi-layered, deep-thinking, butt-kicking action comic, and I'm loving these things.
Well, a lot of the colors are coming from the splintering of the Guardians.
Yeah.
So, that's where a lot of this is being driven by as well. So they're part of the problem, these stupid laws and things like that. There comes a point where you're making too many laws.
It's micromanaging. Mm-hmm. Anybody, who've lived in, who've worked in an office, you always have at least one time when you've had that manager that's the micromanager who every single 5 minutes is going, what'd you do now? Well, did you do this? Did you do this? Did you do that? And you just want to sit there and slock them one, so I'm waiting for the complete rebellion against the Guardians and the, kind of curious what's going to happen when the Alpha Lanterns, when they start saying, wait a minute, something's not right here. Because something's going to click in an Alpha Lantern. One of them is either going to turn to another color or I don't know what. There's going to be an uproar in the Alphas, along with this whole rebellion.
Or are the Alphas going to be used against the regular Lanterns?
Well, that's...
being the ultimate police force. So,
yeah,
how's that going to go?
Yeah,
because I don't see the regular Lanterns tolerating too much more of this. And is there going to be civil war within the Greens the way that there is within the Sinestro Corps? A lot of questions at the moment. I'm really torn over the Carol and Cowgirl triangle with Hal. I love the new relationship. Cowgirl's been a really well-developed character. But I have to admit that the classic relationship with Carol tugs at my heartstrings. It's kind of interesting because you probably don't have any attachment to that relationship.
Exactly. I was sitting there and I can recognize exactly what they're doing. And I'm like, yeah, that's a cool thing because I know she's got this long history. But for me, I'm like, it's no contest, Hal. You got Cowgirl there, you know. Yeah, Carol's your old and dear friend. You know, we all have that, you know, girl that is your good buddy, that's your pal. She's your Winnie Cooper, if you want to go, you know, Wonder Years. She's been that friend. She's been there by your side and always be that special relationship. But she's not, you know, the one.
What if Winnie Cooper was your first love and she was the one at one point in time? That's the relationship you don't have with Carol. And that's the interesting part of this whole thing.
Yeah.
That's where the twist comes in now. And Carol, that's why she's having this reaction. She was the Star Sapphire previously, before there was this Star Sapphire core. So it's interesting. I love the inner conflict brought on by the red ring with Hal. We see that Hal is still trying to focus because he's used to that. That's his MO. Still creates constructs out of the red. We also learn that while blue may be the most powerful light, it requires the Green Lantern aura nearby to function. I liked that little twist. I like the twist that the red has their own thing with the nasty vomit, almost like it's spitting out all the distaste that comes with the things that drive their rage, and it uses it against its opponents. I was like, ugh.
It reminded me of 28 Weeks, where the super zombies that run and sprint, they puke up blood and it can you know, turn you. And I was just like, oh, man, so many things are just like, as I'm reading these different constructs, I'm really gunning for Orange. All the talk about the Orange, the Agent Orange, that's the one I'm looking forward to because that's the Vega system.
That's that Philip Tan artwork.
Yeah, too. So they kept saying how wonderful that is. It's one of those things with the Green Lantern card. I'm sitting there, I'm getting like, yeah, give me more, and you know, it's an excitement.
Did you hear that Doug Mahnke is going to be the artist taking over on Green Lantern?
Oh, really?
He's going to be the new, after all this, he's going to be the new long-term Green Lantern artist, so that's going to be great. What do you think when Hal started to do the Rainbow Lantern thing? I loved how the blue ring combined with his green detected the red impurity and then dispelled it. How did you like wasn't that a cool sequence?
Once again, it does show that Hal Jordan is the top Green Lantern. Yeah, there's going to be arguments and there's going to be people saying, no, Kyle is, no, John is, no, Guy kicks ass. Hal Jordan is the man.
Do you think he is going to be the Rainbow Bright of the DC Universe?
You know what? I'm wondering, actually, if Hal's going to have multicolors. If that's going to be the end of the war, if Hal, like, embraces all of the different colors. And he is, instead of being a Green Lantern, he is the Rainbow Lantern.
Hal in his Technicolor Dreamcoat?
Yeah, exactly. Ooh, hey. I wore my coat. Okay. I won't sing from Joseph and the Technicolor Dreamcoats, I promise. Well, maybe.
Yeah,
hey, if he does it, dude, I'm singing, okay?
Please don't. Please don't do it, Hal. Go green. These power sources are new to all of them, and I like that even Walker was not prepared for what happened to Hal. It was a shock. Okay, I'm such a dork. Of course the Star Sapphires would seek out Carol Ferris. I don't know why, when she was first in that issue, I don't know why it didn't dawn on me that that's where it was heading. I was like, duh. I'm having a lot of those duh moments lately, like where there's reveals afterwards. I'm just kind of like, why didn't I see that coming? I really enjoyed the issue. It was just kind of a pleasant ride, and I was kind of caught up in the whole love triangle thing, but when it came about, I would not want to be in Sinestro's crosshairs. He is one angry, determined dude. The fight between Mongol and him should be spectacular. I love that it's actually building between both titles on the development end. We get the hint of Larfleeze becoming an Orange Lantern, the Reds are seeking out the Blue, and the Lantern War is going to be a blast to watch unfold, because what factions have motivations against which? Is that going to divide factions, where motivations against one core versus another core is going to decide whether a faction is quote-unquote good or evil? Is it going to be as simple as all that?
Yeah, and we even saw that with, dealing with Kreb. Yeah, mm-hmm. Kreb with, the baby capture, turned over to Sapphire, the Lavender.
Star Sapphires, right.
Star Sapphires, I thought that was just a really cool way to deal with the character.
Right.
It's not cut and dry, lock him, her, it in the science cells. No, maybe there's another way to deal with it.
Origin and Omens was really good in this issue. I really respect that John is still driven by his mistake that cost the planet Xanthi. It's what drove Fatality to seek his death, and it's interesting to see that even in this new role as Star Sapphire, that the pain of that loss still drives her. It's just in a different way. I really like that. It's interesting that Hal doesn't see what the problem with Carol is, yet Tom does. It's easy to observe a relationship from the outside. I think we all do that very well with friends. Now, do you think Hal really doesn't see it or is afraid to admit it? Afraid of what it might mean for him if he has to face the fact that she still has these strong feelings for him? Because she was married when he came out of all this, and that, made her off limits. Now if he's got to face the fact that those feelings are really there and that's strong, what do you think that means?
I honestly think he doesn't see it because, when it comes to women, most men are stupid. We got to admit that. We're blinded and we have these set roles that we have. He has a set role. He's accepted in his life that Carol is my friend. Mm-hmm. That's all. And so for him to, look beyond that, it would need a altering, life-shaking event.
But you got to admit, being a guy, sometimes we have forced stupidity, where we don't want to face something and we make ourselves intentionally dumb?
Yeah, that's a possibility.
If anybody's read Chronicles of Narnia, the very first book, Magician's Nephew, it was the last book, but it was chronologically first, Uncle Andrew made himself dumb to the point where he couldn't hear the talking animals. This is an Uncle Andrew moment, I think, in some extent with Hal. I think Hal knows Carol well enough that he should know what's going on by the fact that there was some contact going on there and things like that. I don't think Hal's that dumb. I think he's making himself dumb.
And that could be, but I don't know. I know from my experience, I've dealt with, people that, later on I found out, oh yeah, she was into you. I'm like, really? Oh wow. And it never dawned on me that, that was my friend. They've always been my friend, and that's it.
See, you're coming at it from the standpoint this has always been his friend.
Right.
This was long-time lover, huge history, very on again, off again. But then, think New Frontier.
Yeah.
Okay? New Frontier was very much so a look at what the foundations of that relationship was. That continued for years. There's a rich history of this relationship here. This is Ali Dinah kind of relationship history here.
Yeah, so
it's interesting how our perception of this relationship is driven very differently. It's not that you're wrong. I think it shows that our different reading experiences of the character puts us in a different place. You're very right for where you're coming from, and I'm very right for where I am. It has to do with our reading history with these characters. It's interesting. It's interesting to see where this is going to go. Are the Guardians condemning Alan Scott and the other two Lanterns that fall outside the core? It seems to be those three were all the ones that fall outside the core. The one was from that covert mission with Guy Gardner involved and all that stuff. And the other one's the one that's been seeking out information on these Black Lanterns. What's going on there? That was an interesting little twist in there.
I got a weird theory on that.
Go ahead.
That when this is all said and done, maybe those Lanterns who are outside of the core will somehow avoid it. Like, I'm thinking all the only way to defeat the Black Lanterns would be to kill all the rings. So all the rings will be toast and dead. And those who are outside of it will still have some power. And they'll be the ones who, bring back either the Green Lantern Corps or bring back all the Lanterns or bring back some of the Lanterns or whatnot. Something like that.
So they'll be kind of like the new Guardians, the new leaders or something like that. The new replacements. I don't know.
And maybe not all of them. Maybe I could see Alan, recharging up the big lantern, and the one, reforming one of the cores, and then the other reform. It's the new rebirth of the whole Green Lanterns will be based on those three, not based on the Guardians.
Yeah, it's interesting. I don't see all the rings being destroyed. I guess that isn't something. I'm not saying this isn't to dispute you. It's just a matter of talking about speculation. I gotta say that it is your concept that they might turn out to be some kind of council or something like that at some point. I don't see as a crazy idea. I think all bets are off on as far as what's going to happen. I don't think it's a crazy idea that they might be some kind of council, though. I don't know. We'll see. Black Hand is kneeling to who? And, it all looks intense. So who is he kneeling to? That means that there's going to be somebody that's his guardian.
Yeah.
So I wonder who that's
Anti-Monitor is the only thought that popped in my head.
Well, yeah, but the Anti-Monitor really is the battery.
Yeah.
Versus, I don't know. It's interesting. Let there be light so it can be consumed by darkness. I was like, oh! What a great ending. Green Lantern Corps number 33. I'm going to talk about 33 and 34 real quick. Pleased to meet you, Mr. President. Hope you guess my name. Great Rolling Stones reference from Mongol. I love it. I love that he uses his severed arm as a weapon. You know, like other people's severed arm, that's kind of it, end of story. His severed arm becomes a new club.
Yeah.
I'm glad to see Daxam and the other worlds of the DC universe that we see so often in the future when we see Legion stories being brought in through books like Green Lantern Corps and the Starlin work. It does add a larger sense of scale to the DC universe. It, feels like a universe. It adds unique storytelling opportunities, too, with exploring these cultures and how they interact with more commonly known races. It adds, like, little twists and dynamics. The political intrigue, I think you were talking about in the beginning,
yeah,
a lot of that comes from the fact that these races have that. Natu and Kyle sitting in a tree. Natu has been one of my favorite new lanterns since their introduction. The new law and the discussion that Kyle and Guy had really made for some interesting social commentary on the Guardians. Sometimes you start down a path and you can't stop. Adding way too many laws, the loss of that many lanterns, many of whom I'm assuming are already well-trained, is a big problem. Their laws now are making lanterns give up their rings, so now they're dealing with the force of a lot of newbies, which I think is going to be an issue. That's
going to be a huge issue. And I also really, I'm hoping that Natu doesn't follow the pattern of Kyle's, all his other girlfriends, and, she sticks around for a while, and nothing horrific happens to her. Issue,
we'll talk about Origin and Omens.
Yeah, I know. I'm worried about that.
The relationship with these two not only makes sense, but has drawn me further into the book. I love how she helped him to redirect some of his pain to a positive outlook. You know what I mean? That was great. She's got him painting again.
Yeah. That whole mural thing, that was just an outstanding thing. Because he's like, he could have used his ring and painted the primer coat in a heartbeat, but he had to do it by brush. And then the other lanterns heard, he's doing a mural for the fallen lanterns. Hey, let me help. Hey, give me. And the next thing you know, they're all doing it by hand. And they're not using their rings. Yeah. It's that personality, just that personal touch you get to it. Like people say when they go to DC and they see the Vietnam Memorial, that solid granite with the names etching. I know when I went to the Arizona Museum in Hawaii, the Pearl Harbor Monument, and it just, those moments and events in your life just affect you, and you're just like, whoa. To be a part of one of those type of monuments tributing your fallen comrades, that had to be you sit there, and I can actually feel just the emotional tug as you're painting on it, and you got to use bare hand, and you got to actually put brush to stone just to make it connected, be a part of it. If I was a lantern, I'd want to be there, and I'd want to be painting it as well.
It also shows, and I think these scenes are critical. It shows some moments where camaraderie is being built amongst the lanterns, which I think is something that's going to be key later when obviously there's got to be some rebellion against the Guardians for what's going on here. What is that going to look like, and what form is that going to take? And that's where these lanterns, I think, are going to be bonding over these type of things. And how do the Guardians feel about them doing something like this? Notice we haven't seen the Guardians respond at all.
I'm guessing the Guardians are going to say no. And what I think, and this is, I hope this doesn't happen, but I think it's going to happen, is one of the Guardians will go down and just with a single mind thought, shunk, wipe it gone. And it'll be after it's completely done. Like the final brush, and it'll just say, no, you can't have that. Shunk, and wipe it clean. Or, just something, I think, and that'll be like one of the final straws in the, the flare up or the anger,
Because of emotion that it might be.
Right. Because of the emotion.
Right.
That looking at that wall generates in the hearts of the young lanterns.
Mm-hmm. And they think emotion's the issue. It's one of the reasons why they outlawed love between, for lantern members. I mean, so it's interesting to see how that twist is going to play into all this. Yeah, I totally think that's where that's headed. I think it's a very pivotal moment. It seems like a little thing, but it's not. Miri and Sarek's encounter reminds us quickly at how well this book has crafted its supporting cast. Miri's origin story was not a throwaway element. It defines her and her role. Sarek is the kind of guy that everyone is nice to at the dinner table, but nobody wants to sit next to. Comes in here like, okay, we got the creepy lantern here, but he's one of those guys that you worry for, though. It's never good to be alone in your darkness. I'm not sure he's going to survive what's coming up. I may be reading too much into it, but like I said, creepy dude, but I love what he brings to this book. And he's one of the three that we were talking about, and so I don't know. Mongol versus Arkillo. I am glad at the time taken developed each of the corps, because we've got an interesting situation here where when I heard about this multiple core concept, I was sitting here myself, ugh, is this going to get overdone? Too many core, too many colors. What is this all going to mean? And when you see it executed now and how it's so tied out of the different emotions that are brought about by each of the colors, these different colors, they bring about a different MO, a different way of operating. And this infighting between Mongol versus Arkillo is a great thing. Arkillo is one of the first.
Well, Arkillo was the first, I thought. And especially he was the first one that we saw, that we both were like, oh man, this dude's a badass.
And very well developed before he even got a ring.
Yeah.
So, that storyline, he was actually approached after we got to see him on that level. I have to admit, I chuckled at the ending when the Yellow Lantern in custody of Arisia and Sodam is killed by Sodam's mother crash landing on him. I love the build for the Battle of Daxams. But it is when I was talking about Mongol versus Arkillo, it's really who is the top bully will decide who runs the Yellow Lanterns.
I honestly wonder if we're going to see a Sinestro-Mongol battle. I can honestly see Sinestro showing up there, those two eyeballing each other, recognizing they're both powerful warriors, and Sinestro doing something like, you don't tell me what to do, I won't tell you what to do.
Well, Sinestro already said he's going after him.
He did say it?
Oh, yeah.
I thought he was going after his daughter.
No, he's going after Mongol, too. Ooh. He's like, he's going to deal with all of it.
Oh, okay. Because I thought his next step was, because the Red Lanterns showed where he was going. Showed that he's got a daughter.
He did say that. The exact lines were, it came from Roman&quot first. Shall we venture to Daxam to burn Mongol's eyes from his head? Mongol will suffer, Roman&quot. He will suffer like no other, save for Jordan and Atrocitus. But, God, these names are...
I know, can't you go with Bob and John? Yeah. What's wrong with that?
Yeah, and Roman&quot.
Yeah.
I keep saying Roman&quot every time I say it because I'm thinking of Tomar.
Yeah.
Tomar Ray and Tomar 2 and all that. But it is interesting that Sinestro has more than one problem to deal with at the moment. You're right, his daughter is his first priority, but he is definitely going to go. I can't see him letting Mongol stand.
Yeah, and Mongo doesn't step down. So that's... But here's the thing. It's not about power, strength. It's about control of that ring. And the only person would even venture would have as much willpower and control of the ring would be Hal. We saw in the battle with...
Arkillo?
Thank you. Drawing a blank on him. That they didn't use rings. That was raw brute force versus brute force. So...
Well, that battle was very much the top bully in the yard.
Yeah, so...
So, will a bully get along with Sinestro? They're two different ideologies, two different ways of thinking. Both fear-driven, but, that's going to be the interesting little twist there. Arkillo was more Sinestro's boy, whereas Mongol...
Yeah.
Isn't ready to take the back seat to anybody.
And he's not going to kneel or take orders from anybody, so it's going to be...
It's going to be a throwdown.
Yeah.
And I want to see it.
And I got money on Sinestro, for the record, by the way.
I do, too. Origins and Omens is where we see the mural getting painted, and Claremont's X-Men used to do this kind of thing with baseball games. It is great to see characters having fun every so often. I do want to note that. That was kind of the interesting little twist from that as well. It was great to see that they felt like real people, aliens, whatever you want to say, because, you would have downtime. You would have something where there would be a part of you that you're kind of like, it kind of endears you to them. Again, it's the accessibility thing. And it was very well written. It was an excellent choice. It's the calm before the coming storm.
Yeah.
Children as Yellow Lanterns. How will the parents react? Interesting little twist there. Jade returning. As a Black Lantern, perhaps, or for real? I wasn't clear in that segment.
Yeah, I don't think Black Lantern. I think maybe somehow she's coming back.
Yeah, it's interesting to see how this will affect the other new relationship that we've seen. Guy and Kyle's Huck and Tom references. I love the way these two play off each other. They just read like old friends, and that makes them so great. It's month after month. Peter Tomasi really knows what he's doing with this book. The artwork is always stunning by Patrick Gleason. It's a good-looking book. It's a fun read. The colors are great. I mean, it's really just the whole creative team on this book just really... I find and this is totally a compliment to both books, I find myself having trouble deciding which Green Lantern book I like more from month to month. And I really got to say, it's one month, Green Lantern-quot is the better issue. The other month, Green Lantern has the better issue. And that's such a great way to feel about two books that are part of that same universe. And I think it's because they play off each other so well. in two different ways. It's just such a great reads. Issue number 34. Wow, I love that this very cool origin story of Sodam plays so much into this. We've seen this guy. We see emotions of a child betrayed as he lashes out at his mother for not protecting his right to individuality, his right to be himself, and really stifling him and crushing who he is.
And doing more, not only just stifling and crushing him, but they like went into his brain and they messed with his mind and erased, his friend. That was just a complete and total.
In more ways than one.
Yeah. Then they stuffed him. They stuffed and mounted his friend, and they put him up in a museum. And I'm just like, at one hand, when I first started seeing his reaction where he's like, screw you, I'm not helping out, I was kind of mad at him, like, dude, you're a hero. And then as he's going on, I was like, you know what? I'm going to give him a pass. They did a royal mind job on him. I'm like, he's kind of got a right there to say, you made your bed, now lie in it. It's, in a way, it's a cosmic justice type thing.
Especially though when he learns it was the Sinestro Corps, that turned him around really quick. He's like, well, they got to be stopped. So I did like that. I love the twist that the escape was due to the shift he was crafting from the parts Tassog left behind. Mm-hmm. That was a neat little twist. And a sick part of me, I got to admit, a sick part of me did chuckle that his friend was stuffed like a creepy Elmo to keep everyone afraid of aliens. It really, I did
That's
chuckle.
Wrong.
That's Gallows. Well, it is Gallows humor, and I was chuckling. Yeah. He's right to be pissed. And I'm glad that he did have that moment of redemption with his friend where he made his mom apologize and really drove that home. I agree with you and Arisha here. Sodam's wrong. They should have backup. Why would you go to that planet without it? Dude ripped out Archillo's tongue.
Yeah, that was a wow moment.
Well, the brutality of that toe-to-toe battle, and we've obviously haven't seen the last of Archillo, but it's going to be interesting to see what that. I didn't take it Archillo was dead. Archillo was just maimed and.
He put Archillo in his place. Mm-hmm. Archillo knows now. Okay, he is his prog, so he's got to do what he says now.
No, he said that Archillo's vanishing and we're not going to see him again. Remember, those were Mongol's words. So he isn't looking to make Archillo like his footstool. He's looking. Archillo's gone. And as a symbol, he said, we're not going to see or hear from him again, is what he said. And that when he ripped out the tongue. Mm-hmm. So he's not looking to have Archillo around, which is going to be interesting to see what happens if Sinestro gets to Archillo.
Yeah.
What that's going to look like.
Or if another color gets to Archillo, like red.
Oh, yeah, a lot of rage in Archillo right now. I didn't even think of that. You know what?
Could you imagine Archillo as a red lantern?
I think that's more likely to happen, being honest.
That wouldn't be a good thing.
Well, Archillo already could have been a red lantern without having to have that done to him. I think this battle meant so much more because Archillo was so well developed, and I think that was really the key there. Natu and Kyle, that relationship needs to continue, and I'm glad to see them standing against this law. They aren't hurting anyone. And Guy's reasoning last issue made sense. They work together and need to trust each other with their lives. It makes sense that they would know each other on a level that most don't get a chance to. And I hope they weather the coming storms they'll face. I love that Kyle loves her even more for getting him back to the core of who he is as an artist and a person. She brought back the positive into his life. And I think that's where the connection is, because you can see Kyle developing more into the character. I think that people who've been reading Kyle's for years, I've read Kyle through his entire run. So there's a connection there. And seeing her get him back to that, I think I'm even more connecting with her because of that. And that's really cool. It's like she's bringing back an old friend. He takes the mural so seriously with his thoughts of revision because of the importance of the message behind it, to honor the lives of those who have fallen. Interested to see how the Guardians react, like I said. I think that's going to be a powerful moment. Crib, you were talking about before. Interesting as a Star Sapphire. How will her previous role and her tested love for those children play into her new role? It's going to be an interesting little twist there. The mind games with the Sinestro Corps members was interesting. This group is divided into factions now. Mongols faction, Sinestro's, and now this jailed faction that thinks Sinestro's dead. It does make sense that they wouldn't want them to know that Sinestro is alive and had escaped. And I do like how this book continues to echo Hal's book. Great job by the writers and editorial, because it really does, this all fits seamlessly together, and you feel like you're seeing different perspectives on the same events. And I like how nothing seems to be a throwaway, no event.
Now, here's something I was wondering. Okay, we have the blue lanterns that give the green lanterns hope and empower them. What if one of the other colors out there?
They give the Green Lanterns hope?
Yeah, the blue.
One of the blue are their own.
But
dilemma.
when
they
when the
pull
blue
off of the
when the
green.
blue is with the green is more powerful.
Well, no, the blue are become powerful.
No, the green also becomes more powerful.
So they're kind of a symbiotic relationship.
Yeah, it's
between them.
the blue needs a green to activate, but when the green is with the blue, because remember when Hal first came in encounter with that dude, his ring levels rose up to like 200,
true.
300%.
So it's a symbiotic relationship between them.
I'm wondering,
together.
is there a color who does the same thing for the yellow?
Oh, that's interesting.
Is there one of the other colors that we haven't seen what they do yet? Do they do the same thing towards the yellow lanterns?
It's got to be periwinkle.
I don't know.
I'm thinking it's all the sissy colors like kind of feed off each other. Because them and the chartreuse lanterns, it's those three together. Yellow, periwinkle, and chartreuse. Unbeatable. They're all the kids that were ever beat up at recess.
Because here's what I was thinking.
Sorry.
We have, the Star Sapphires, they're the indigo rings. We still don't know what the violet rings do. You figure blue is the one that strengthens the green. Maybe the dark blue, which is a blue and red mixture of violet, is what strengthens the yellow. I actually thought about this.
Yeah, I'm still wondering about burnt sienna.
No, that's not a ring.
Huh? How do you
That's
know?
not a ring.
How do you know?
Because I know these things.
Oh, you do. I did like the bit where Vice was brought in with his mouth covered so he can't use the vicious vomit.
Yeah.
That was a neat little twist. Scar is upping the ante and setting the stage deep within Oa. She releases the prisoners from the science cells. Interesting dilemma as the red and yellow don't much care for each other. So what is that going to be like with Vice in there and these other guys coming out? So are we going to have a massacre or what's that going to be like? So fun little twists, and I like that. You're right, though. It's there are lantern colors yet that I'm curious to see. Not so much what they do as how they interact with each other. And you bring up an interesting point there. Is blue the only one that reacts with something? It almost seems like you'd almost need something else to.
Yeah.
And how is black going to affect all of them? Is it?
Yeah, who knows? I don't know, man. It's
because it's the absence of color. So,
and of course, they asked this question at cons, and I think the answer always was, "Oh, that's a good question," and no one ever said yes or no. But is there a white? There's a black lantern. Is there a white lantern?
Well, yeah, we'll find out. Apparently.
Yeah, maybe that's going to be Hal Jordan.
Wouldn't that be all of them put together? So yeah,
exactly, Hal.
Yeah, so maybe we're seeing maybe that is the Rainbow Bright of the DC universe. Yeah, the White Lantern. We'll see. I want to talk a little bit about Supergirl number 39, if we could.
Oh, definitely.
Because this is a book. Okay, I'm confused. Let's go right to this. Wasn't Superwoman operating with Reactron at the same time Lucy Lane was chatting with Supergirl, or were those events taking place at different times? How did you read that?
Okay, when I first read it, I took it that it was different times, and it was written that way to throw us, the reader, off. Yeah. And then I read it through a second time. I took it more at the literal standpoint, saying, no, this is letting us know that Lucy Lane is not Superwoman. And also the comment was made about with her costume protecting her from the kryptonite of Reacton. Because after she brought him in, they're like, "Oh, I see the containment field protected you from the kryptonite," and she kind of even hushed him up, saying, "Hey, don't go spreading that around." So that may be a Kryptonian inside the costume, and it's just her costume protects her from the.
So then I'm back. If it's a Kryptonian in the costume, I'm back to thinking it's Allura.
Yeah, if it's a Kryptonian, it's Allura. If it's not a Kryptonian, it's Lucy. Mm-hmm. That's my bet.
Ursa.
No, not Ursa. She's too controlled, if you will.
Yeah, you're right.
Ursa's out there. Plus, we also know Ursa still needs to wear the visors and the goggles stuff like that.
Yeah. Oh, you're right. Very good catch. Very good catch. Yeah, I don't know. My number one choice was Lucy Lane. So if it's not her, I don't know. Yeah. It's interesting. This is becoming one of my favorite books. This is another one up on my top stack list. Like there is, there's a list of like 10 books right now that I'm gravitating towards the second they come out. Supergirl's in that top 10. This is a fun book. And I guess I'm shocked by it because I've always liked her character, But this book now is really up to the ante in a very short time as far as what quality is like in a book.
Yeah, they've really started developing Supergirl again. They're going back to, and it's not, for a while there, she was kind of stagnant in the, oh, what's going on with me, kind of whiny, yeah, kind of role. Mm-hmm. Now they're beyond that. They're now developing who she is, in and out of the costume. They're developing what kind of hero she's going to be, who she's going to have to deal with. It's, there's a wider variety to Supergirl. She's not just the teenage cousin of Superman. She is now a hero. She's now doing her thing. And she's got to deal with this whole anti-Kryptonian law, which will be a huge factor. I can see more of the... I was thinking maybe she would switch up her look a little bit, but then she's like, no, she can't. This is who she is. She's not going to hide. And what's going to happen the first time she goes to save someone and they don't want a Kryptonian helping her? They don't want this Kryptonian helping them.
Right.
Like, dude, you're going to die if I don't help you.
The Superwoman thing seems to be some smear campaign, which I don't get. So it's an interesting twist. Because I feel like, now, all right, tell me if you agree with this. Superwoman, do you think she's working with General Lane?
Yeah.
I think that's a definite, right?
Yeah, that's a definite. She's working with General Lane, and she's the one who killed the Liberty agent.
Right. Well, that's a for sure. We saw that in this issue. But it's an interesting little twist for me. I don't know. I'm curious to see what's going on with her. I have a feeling the identity of Superwoman is going to be one of those things where I kick myself afterwards. It's going to be one of those dull moments.
I'm leaning more towards her Allura for the identity of Superwoman. I think that's who it's going to be.
The House of L symbol and the use of that, for example, was a neat little twist. And how Supergirl felt the need to defend that. This is not I know my family. This is not a family member. So it's an interesting, I guess that's an interesting little conundrum. Is it somebody else? Or what's she going to do when she finds out it is mom? I don't know.
Yeah, what do you do? Because she's always supported her mom, and she's been on, the mom's side. Granted, she's had moments where she wished it was her mom who died, not her father.
Well, especially during that argument with mom through that crystal, to the point where she smashed that crystal so hard that she got herself bleeding.
Yeah.
So that was an interesting little twist there, because I'm assuming because it's a Kryptonian crystal, that's why it can affect her. I really liked those moments where we got to see her lash out. And Mom was, what I liked about the brutality of Mom was we got to see, Kara to the point where she has developed her own identity. She's sure of who she is now, when for so long she wasn't. Very similar to Wonder Girl's journey. I think that's what I'm liking about these two right now. We got to see them both go through some hard times. Wonder Girl because of the loss of Connor Kent. Supergirl kind of always striving to find her own identity and who she really is, and come to terms and grips with living in Clark's shadow, or Cal's shadow. And seeing both of these characters kind of reach this point right now where they've got their own identities, they're very interesting and intriguing to follow. The Daily Planet stuff with Lana and how that's playing off, I really liked that as well, and how she feels like she's part of this bigger Superman universe. It gives Lana an interesting role in all this as well, being the confidant and being the friend and showing her own story. Like, 'cause she's got to keep the secret while at the same time feeding her the info that she needs.
Yeah, and it's, the strength of Superman isn't just Superman. It was Lois, Ma, Pa, Kent. Well, now, Kara's got that support structure, has that person she can lean on and get help from. So,
who has a rich history with all this, though. Lana's been there before. So she's providing the experience that Kara lacks. The development of the characters like Inspector Henderson works for me, too. I like there's a certain amount of discomfort with Broyles and the idea of working with Supergirl. He actually tries to arrest her at first. She certainly has had a strange relationship with the government even before the whole new Krypton thing kicked in. She feels much more heroic. I'm excited for the confrontation next issue because of Reactron and Superwoman, who killed Agent Liberty, working together now. This is the guy that killed her father. That's going to be a nice throwdown next issue. Vigilante number 4, the Death Trap tie-in.
Yeah.
Oh, the more we learn about Flynn until he gets a new identity from JJ, the more I find him interesting. What did he do that was so horrible in his past that he feels the need to pay for it? What things did he do? Because it's more than one thing. He's got his main motivation to continue living, not just to continue on as vigilante, but to continue living, because he makes the comment that until he's done doing what he intends to do as vigilante, he has to keep living and then he can die. Is really his MO, which was an interesting little fatal point that this is his like life calling right now, and he feels when he's accomplished this mission that it can be all over.
Oh yeah, and I can kind of feel for him. I one time didn't. I lost a library book that I never returned. Back when I was in high school. So that still just hangs over my shoulders. Just that weight is just bearing down that I'll never be able to return that book again. It eats me alive.
It was terrible. I saw you on Channel 5 the other night. On the news. Man bullies little boy who's got late books. See you carrying 3 kids on your shoulder with library books, making them return them.
Hey.
and you're going to keep going.
Not on my watch.
You're going to keep going. You're going to keep going until everybody's got their books back. He's working with the FBI temporarily because it serves his purpose, but he's also buying time to disappear. The situation with Donna catching him at the headquarters was great. We got to see that he has a code to the point where he's willing to give up and tell her the truth to avoid it getting violent at that point. I know that he isn't sure that he could take down Donna, but I also think that he deliberately, I liked that inner dialogue where he was saying this particular situation requires a different sort of tact because of the fact that I don't want to get into a throwdown with this girl to the point where I've got to do something to try and get out of the situation.
It shows the most dangerous weapon is the human mind. Mm-hmm. It's not just, can I shoot straight? Can I kick faster? Can I punch? Like it's strategy. It's the mind. It's, the total weapon. And that was something I really liked, the fact that, this is showing more than just a bang, bang, shoot 'em up guy.
I like how he used the FBI arrival as a cover to escape. Following this up by crashing the copter to keep the heroes off his trail long enough to get more info on the Jericho situation because the fire that caused then would keep them busy because he's got some leads that he wants to follow. Unfortunately for him, Jericho is in Cyborg. Jericho reveals some of his secrets, like that he's from Europe, for example, and that, he would have to go back there if, this doesn't work out. Interesting little twist. His mask doesn't let Jericho have access to his eyes. And I love how that frustrated Jericho, that he couldn't jump into him and gather his secrets. What do you think the whole Jericho is suffering from? What do you think of this whole thing? That he's suffering from the echoes of all the personalities that he's taken over? Remnants?
Yeah, well, you think about it. If you got multiple people inside your mind, there's only a matter of time before, you completely snap and lose it, especially... He's usually jumping into evil and villains and the nastiest of the nastiest. So he has that going on in his head. Mm-hmm. So and
that's probably the twist of the frustration with not being able to get into Vigilante's head. He wants those secrets because he wants to use and manipulate them.
I say it's kind of like in a drug, an addiction that he has to it, that he needs his fix. And it's not just about, doing whatever he's going to do. There's just that, it's you want what you can't have.
It's like a perverse need.
Yeah.
That's what I liked about that. There was a power in that moment between those two there, because I took it in a very deeper sense that Jericho was irritated and pissed that he couldn't get in there.
Yeah.
The battle with Cyborg was very cool. Shooting him in the shoulder, then the sword to the cybernetic side of his head. The human bits where we learned that Vigilante went to the museum when he was a kid was a nice little touch. It adds this sense of a real rounded person to this imaginary character. I like those little, it's a small little dialogue line, but again, those are things you would think and reflect on if you walked into a place that you've been to before. At the end of the issue, the FBI's have the guns trained on a downed Vigilante as the issue closes and Cyborg/Jericho escapes. Interesting little twist there. Do you think the FBI is trying to arrest him, or they're going to continue to further utilize him because there's the kind of unspoken camaraderie between them? I don't know.
Yeah, I don't know. I think, I'm pretty sure he's going to get away.
Oh, yeah, because he's in Death Trap.
Whether he gets away with their help, or whether he gets away just because he's good, or whether he gets away because they let him go away, but not, it's one of those things where, oops, I could have stopped him. Oh, well, kind of thing.
I want to talk a little bit about Trinity. Because I've been talking to Alan Pasalacqua, and we're getting him back on. He's agreed to come back on the show and chat. But I don't want to wait. Trinity's out every week, so certainly we got plenty to talk to Alan about. But the events of issues 40 to 42, it's been a while since we've talked about this book, and I'd really because I love this book, and I feel like we haven't talked about it much in a while. So I'm let's stop that and let's start chatting about it now. Morgaine, Enigma, and the ever-changing third person managed to pull off a spell to wipe out the big three from existence. So we can kind of just chat a little bit about some of the things we haven't discussed. They changed the balance of our world. They began shaping the world into their own image. Slight snag, it wasn't the real Despero. It was Kanjuro, who was, the third, which threw off the whole entire spell. Morgaine wants, and they all three of them have different things that they want. Morgaine wants our Earth in her image. Will she stop at our Earth? Too greedy for power that she feels she's entitled to versus that she's earned? I don't think she would stop at Earth, do you?
Oh, yeah, I think she'll be very placid with just the one
so?
Earth. Oh, yeah, she's a reasonable young lady.
Benevolent ruler?
Oh, yeah, it's going to be a great rule. Viva la Morgaine,
Yeah. So you really think that they should have just stayed as is?
Oh, yeah, hey, why not? What the hell? Dude, come on, man.
Was that James talking?
No, that was somebody else. I don't know who that one was yet. But, no, it's... she is, it's the oldest cliche is power corrupts, power corrupts absolutely. Take it to a next level with her, because not only is she corrupt, she's twisted, she's mean, she's just flat out evil. And, when you get that pure evil, they're never satisfied. They always want more, more, more.
I love Arthurian legend.
Yeah.
And, movies like Excalibur is a movie. I've got it on DVD. I love that movie. It's a great movie. I've read books on it. It's interesting to see how much she feels like someone out of time who's still been questing throughout time. I think it's the interesting things of this DC universe with the history that it's got, that there's characters you can pull from throughout that. I like that. It's just a nice enigma. Has a twisted nobility about him.
Yeah.
And this is an interesting little twist with him, because I like that the robot, who's supposed to be a version of his child, has caught on to his twisted nobility and started acting on her own. Notice, your math isn't exactly, your 2 + 2 is 16 isn't really working for me here. I wonder if we will see him eventually realize the error of his ways through that robot.
I think we got a shot at him.
I do too.
He's not pure evil. He is... willing. He's kind of like the, I don't even know what kind of category he falls under, because you can't say he's Lex Luthor evil, because you could very easily argue Lex Luthor is pure evil, but he's like
he's crazy.
He's a crazy evil, a driven evil, kind of a
he's not Joker,
misguided evil.
Yeah, misguided
evil maybe is probably him, because
with a little tinge of my elevator's not completely operating right. Yeah. Not like on the Joker level, but
post-traumatic stress disorder type stuff.
You know what? That's more what I'm going for. That's perfect way to put it. Because there's a sense that you can reach this guy. And you gotta be, he's like one of those guys that you tread very carefully around in your intervention. Look what you done! You broke the earth!
Hello?
Yeah. You're a little out there now, buddy. The turning of other worlds into a world like his own, that mirrors his own, isn't the way to redeem his own world and bring back his family. That's the part that I think he's going to have to see. Zor, convict, is another interesting little twist. He wants to put certain elements of our world back so he can make up for the death that he caused. This person's alive now, so the person has to be re-dead so he can do something to redeem himself for the fact that he killed him to begin with.
Talk about continuity headaches, man.
I don't think he's evil either. Again, misguided. I don't know what kind of intervention you would do for this. It's
someone who's he's got the code that he won't stop, and you have to show him that you have to convince him that he's already accomplished his goal. He's like made amends.
He's like a noble doomsday.
Yeah, he's a noble doomsday. Yeah. And you got to show him, dude, you've already made amends. The guy's alive. You don't need to continue. No. You see, you're done. Your quest is finished. You've made amends with this guy.
And I love him.
Yeah.
I mean, he's a very that's what I like about this weird twisted trinity on the other side of the fence, is they're actually entertaining to see what they're going to do next. And you just know there's no way that the three of them, that their goals will converge on any level. There's no way that Morgaine is going to let either of the other two get what they want. And what happens when these other two realize that? I think Enigma knows that he's got to watch her.
Yeah.
I think he knows that it's a very fine line there. I think he thinks that he can be one step ahead of her. I think he thinks he already is one step ahead of her. But, it's going to be an interesting little twist here. And Zor, I think both of them are underestimating Zor. What's going to happen when Zor figures out that either of these two would turn on him?
Or what's going to happen when he figures out those two are evil?
Right.
He will stop them because that is who he is. He's a guard. He's an honor guard. He's a man of honor. He's once he realizes what team they are, he's going to, I got to stop them now.
I got to say, the spell not being complete left open the chance for those closest to the Trinity to remember them. Those were some of my favorite bits. The story being told by these different tribes, and how our heroes were these legends, and that these legends had these wonderful stone statues crafted to them, and how we saw Alfred, be one of the first people to say Bruce, and how Donna and Dick, as they began to get more and more memories back and closer to the truth of their identities and their relationships with these gods that they're seeing there, how we began to see Donna fly again. We began to see Dick do his acrobatics, Tom Tresser and Interceptor, both of them kind of slowly, coming back onto the team. And it was those moments for me were just really well developed. It showed a great understanding by all of the writing team on the supporting cast. And it really felt to me like at any point in time, these are the characters that we're seeing in their monthly books. And that was really important to me. I thought it was really well handled. Now, our heroes returning tipped the battle in the favor of the good guys. And the evil Trinity had to retreat. I do like the villain bits where they were like, hey, you're just leaving us? What's up with that? My favorite bits were when the Trinity first started drawing off the power of those closest to them for the first time. They started to become more in tune with their homes of Metropolis and then Washington. And there's even reference to the fact that Diana's had multiple homes, so that's why the bond isn't as strong. Neat little, again, historical reference points then that she doesn't have, per se, a Metropolis or a Gotham. The Joker bits with Gotham,
yeah.
I think Joker would have taken out the whole other Trinity if he needed to get back his creepy Gotham. That's all he cared about. And I loved that. We were talking about Vigilante just a few moments ago. We were talking about the perverse nature of Jericho. This is taken to a whole new level.
Yeah.
He was like greedy hungry for Batman to come back and bring back this dark, horrible city that is Gotham, because
that's
his his playground.
He loves that town. It's dirty, nasty, skanky, and it's for him. It's the wonderful playground.
It's home.
Yeah.
He finds a comfort in that home. So it's like, you gotta think if Batman's the heart of Gotham, the Joker's like the soul or something. And I think that's part of the problem with why this city is so corrupt forever, because you got a guy like the Joker who really embodies how deep and twisted this city is, and really what Bruce is up against. His heart is, in that concept of constantly fighting against this dark soul of the city to, bring light to that soul. And looking at what the Joker really is, that brick wall that you put up, I loved that moment because I'm just kind of like, wow. It's funny on this level when you see these characters godlike, how you can break it down to something that simple, and that really is the issue here. And that the insurmountable, it's why Batman keeps fighting.
Yeah, and that's something this series has really done. Mm-hmm. It's you think Trinity, it's a story just about them. No, it's not a story with them, and it's the defining story. It's the building story. It's giving you just the heart and soul of the Trinity.
The core, getting to the core of what these characters are, and not just these characters, I think the DC universe in general. I really liked that because the rest of the heroes had the choice of staying like they were on this world or returning to their former selves, the ones we're used to. They chose the former. Carter had a harder time of it because of his confusion over his own differences. I think he liked the commonalities that he had with Jay and Alan on the other version of the world. In this one, he really is more of an outsider at the moment, trying to find his path in the wake of all that has happened and the current revelations. I'm curious to see where his story goes. I like that he feels ready for a transition. Nice flow from this into a new series for him. This felt very natural in its transition to that type of spot for him as well, which we are going to see coming down the road. So I liked that. It felt very real. I'm not sure if he's dead or alive at the moment,
that's the
post-Final
thing.
Crisis,
I know.
but that was an interesting how that felt real. Gangbusters motivations. I really liked how that was kind of, why did you put back on the costume? He's asked by Charity, why did you do this? Why did you go back to this? Rita and him as lovers. It was interesting how this twist is, and he didn't even realize that deep down inside, this is the situation. And they've been so well developed. Right now we're into 42 weeks of this thing.
Yeah.
There's 10 more weeks to go, and they're so richly developed at this point that I do want to see their relationship go somewhere. I want to see a happy ending for these two.
I so want the happy ending, and unfortunately, I'm always worried whenever I see a couple relationship, any type of superhero, romance that, it just, I worry about it just because, are they going to go with the really shocking, really dun-dun-dun moment, or are they going to actually let somebody have some joy and happiness? I'm hoping, because it seems to me we're going to get a happy ending. I think just from what I've read, we're going to get a happy ending, but I don't know.
Yeah. Jon Stewart, Voidhound. Wow.
Yeah.
I didn't see that coming at all. I really like how that plays into the whole Corona thing. I keep forgetting, and it's interesting, there's so much going on in where the characters are at right now. I keep forgetting that this Corona threat is looming. We got 10 weeks left to deal with this Corona threat as well. All this is going on, and we've still got that coming. So Corona meets his former self. There's some disappointment there. It's kind of like, this is what I was? Wow, was that a spectacular-looking visual section, too. We saw them in space, and it reminded me, we were talking about David Barron, about Superman Beyond 3D, how he's talking about that one particular cosmic segment he had in there where he's like, that took me forever to do. When I saw this, I was like, wow, that's, similar reminder of, just how beautiful visually that all looked. Looking for knowledge and power that would make him everything. Would you want to be everything? To know everything, Jim? Would that be something you would crave? Because we see sometimes characters that on this cosmic level crave that. Could you see yourself wanting that? Would you be satisfied with that?
Well, I already know everything, so I just play dumb.
No, I'm talking about on a real serious
seriously.
sense. Because it's interesting when I see this, I'm like, it doesn't appeal to me.
Ignorance is bliss for me. I like the fact that I don't know stuff.
Because we're guys.
I know.
Hey, this is a cyclical conversation. Right back to where we started with Green Lantern. Duh.
Exactly. I like that. I like having the duh kind of moments in my life where, I don't know everything, where I'm still surprised by stuff. And, in like almost every vampire, book and movie I've seen and all that you get these vampires who are immortal, and you see them as they get older, they get bored with just everyday life. There's no excitement, there's no energy, there's no action in living. And that's what life is. Life is this great wonder where you don't know what's going to happen next. Sometimes you got a pretty good idea, but in the end, they can always swerve you. And so I would not want to be, all powerful, all knowing or any of that.
What becomes then what?
Yeah.
I think in life we all need things to strive for, and that's what keeps you going. Who wants everything? You don't, because there's motivation to continue living on every day. How much more boring would that be? It's kind of like, okay, I got it all, now what? And, that kind of boredom that would come from all that. I liked the Voidhound with Krona. How Krona kind of suppresses Jon Stewart, and the Voidhound finds that he was longing for a certain amount of freedom. And Krona and him kind of like, there's almost a understanding that Krona has for this creature who wanted to break free, who wanted to escape, because Krona's been there before. He was trapped in the egg for so long. So it's, all he needed was a giant wall to be pushed off of.
Oh, that's all, yeah.
Krona's the Humpty Dumpty of the DCU. Humpty Dumpty had a great fall. Now pop Krona.
What came first, the chicken or the Krona?
Why did Krona cross the road? Let's stop there. Jon Stewart. I liked that Jon Stewart, really a heck yeah moment. I wanted to high five. Jon Stewart, defiant to the end, sends out the beacon. It shows again the veteran nature of Jon Stewart. We talked about before, what are the Lanterns going to do now that there's a lot of rookies because of some of their laws? Well, now you got Jon Stewart here showing what happens when you got a veteran Lantern in there. He's smart enough to send off that beacon. It reaches Firestorm. I liked that too because it shows in continuity he wouldn't know that Hal was back.
Yeah.
Firestorm was the only guy that he knew he could rely on being there, so he sent the beacon to Firestorm. He didn't know the status. Small little detail. I was like, kudos writers to paying it to editors, whoever paid attention to that detail. High five to you. I liked that a lot. Tiny little thing, but it just, I easily could have missed it, but I was like, ooh, hoorah. Like I said, I want to get Alan on down the road to continue talking about this, but until we're able to actually, we've got so many segments coming up that...
I know.
Alan said he's coming back, so
cool.
Which is great. So I told him over the next couple of weeks we'll work something out to have him on, so record a little Trinity segment to chat about that as well, because I'd like to get his thoughts on working on this weekly book, this monumental epic. This has been a fun read for me, and I really feel like we haven't done enough about it, so we're going to continue, especially in this last 10-issue ride. I want to continue talking about Trinity, because I just think it's fabulous. I want to quickly talk about, because we chatted with this last episode with Fabian Nicieza, Azrael Death's Dark Knight.
Oh, man.
I read all of the issues of the old Azrael series, from Sword of Azrael, straight on through Nightfall, to his solo series, the 100 issues of that. New Azrael, one of the 3 Batmen from the Morrison run. Loved the action sequences showing that he was trained, the Suit of Sorrows being brought back. I liked that because of the fact that this whole Batman thing had such a negative impact on him, he wanted that taken off right away, and that was a condition on whether or not he even put on the Suit of Sorrows, because they weren't sure if that was going to happen. That was a great, powerful moment for me, and they're like trying to figure out, okay, how did Talia and Ra's al Ghul put this thing on anyway? But I liked seeing him in the Suit of Sorrows, and the priest, how the priest turned out to be one of this order and violated his rights in confession. Yeah. And I did like that he made the point to say, I'm sorry I did that, but I felt it was necessary for this order.
For the greater good.
Yeah.
That's a toughie.
But I liked the acknowledgement. I'm glad it didn't just happen, and there was no acknowledgement of it. Because that would have really bugged me if they didn't at least acknowledge it. So another one of those tiny details where I'm like, this priest better say something about this, because he just violated a sacrament.
Yeah, and one of the most sacred of the sacraments.
Yeah, because that's supposed to be your private moments, your private thoughts. And he had, he was really reflecting on his time as one of these 3 Batmen and what that did to him. And basically how it destroyed his life. Because everything that he is, his wife, his family, all that, it's all was tied up into all that and ruined for him because of that situation. The Talia connection here. I love Ra's al Ghul. Even more than Ra's al Ghul, Talia, though, is a wonderful character. I thought her recent appearances in Nightwing have been top-notch. Seeing her in R.I.P., now seeing her in this with the Suit of Sorrows and the 2 different swords.
Yeah. That's what I'm, is the dude getting killed? Are there going to be multiple Azraels in through this? I'm like...
I think he's going to be just fine. It's going to be interesting to see.
Yeah, I'm wondering if there's going to be if this is going to lead to another one, if we're going to see multiple throughout this, maybe?
See, I think it's still going to be him. I think because of the nature of that sword, we're going to find out that he's going to be okay. And she's going to have to deal with the ramifications of the fact that... I'm wondering if it's not as simple with these swords, if, we're going to see some mystical connection to these swords or something. I don't know. I'm very curious to read issue 2.
Yeah, definitely.
So I'm telling you right now, the first issue out of the starting gate, if it continues at this kind of pace, great artwork, interesting action, interesting storytelling and character development. I mean, this guy's a badass. I'm already liking him. For a lot of the reasons I like Vigilante, for example. Not saying that they're cookie cutter. They're 2 very different characters. Yeah. But, I mean, these are kind of like my, these are my kind of gritty kind of... Yeah,
this dude's got some issues in his head that he's got to work through, and that's what I'm wondering, because the Suit of Sorrows drives you mad.
Right.
This dude's already there.
Right.
So what happens when you get that on top of it? This guy is going to be a completely different person in issue 4 than what he is now.
But compelling to see him fight the Suit of Sorrows. Is he giving up his life by putting this thing on, or is he going to find a way to continually battle that? what is that going to be like? Jean Paul Valley had a lot to deal with fighting with his Azrael persona and with the real person of Jean Paul Valley, trying to keep a balance between them. Interesting to see this different twist and different take on that concept. So I really like that. That's what I'm saying. It's not the same thing as Vigilante. I don't mean it that way. But I'm finding that I'm getting the same type of enjoyment out of this in the sense that it's a new, interesting character to explore. And I'm hoping this one does well enough that they consider launching it into a series. Or at least a backup. This would be a great backup story if they don't decide to go full-blown series with the fact that they're doing some of these backups right now, like Ravager and Blue Beetle coming up. So maybe this is one that would be a great backup in like Detective Comics. Well, Detective Comics is going to be Batwoman and The Question.
Ooh.
2 separate stories.
So is The Question going to be a backup, or are they going to...
I'm thinking Batwoman's the main story, Question's backup.
Cool.
So it's going to be interesting to see. I don't know all the details. I just saw in the solicitations. So, and that's not really a spoiler, it's just knowing that we're going to get more Question stories. So that's interesting to see what that's going to look like. I don't know. I don't know if they mirror each other or if they're going to be too... Because the Question's modus operandi right now, spinning out of Final Crisis, is very different than perhaps Batwoman's. So I don't know. I don't know how that would lead her to Gotham. I don't know if it should.
That's her home. That is her home, so I can see her.
But I'm wondering
back.
if her status quo, though, I'm thinking you're going to drop this whole agency that she's been with thing. It almost seems like too good of a storytelling opportunity to pass up.
Part of me thinks we're going to see a shift in the agency to a point where she would want to be a part of the group.
But I think we're going to read that. I don't think we're going to see that off camera.
I don't know. See,
that to me is, I think we're going to see her in the agency and see her really learn about the agency. But maybe she might be within trying to be an agent of change within this agency, rooting out the conspiracy.
And, because
that to me is too good of a storytelling opportunity to pass up. It's Rucka, so whatever he's going to do,
it's going to be good. So, yeah.
So, I don't care. I'm just speculating on what I think it might be, so I could be totally off base here. You might be 100% right. Maybe just her coming to Gotham because it's her home. I'd be happy with that, too. Whatever Rucka's going to do, I'm going to follow because it's Rucka. And he's one of those guys.
It's all good. We know it's going to be good.
So I'm like on board right away, but I was just glad to hear that that's where we're going to be seeing the Question as well. I think we already kind of assumed that, but it's nice to get some verification. Like I said, I want to see this Azrael thing go to series. I think it's a very fast-paced, enjoyable read. Brave and the Bold. I want to talk real quick about this week's episode on Friday, Trials of the Demon. It featured the Gentleman Ghost's Craddock's origin. We got to go back into his history, and back there was Jason Blood. I have a question in this one. It was when Batman went back in time. It was through a spell put on by Jason Blood. Jason Blood knew who he was. I don't understand that. Because he went back in time. It was back during the times of Sherlock Holmes, Watson, and there was this deduction where it was funny. When he came up, he was analyzing Batman from his appearance and his square jaw. He determined that, he was this Avenger who was fighting on the streets and all that stuff, trying to bring in fear to criminals. He sensed from the yellow on his circle, the sense of, he was a good guy, and, quickly determined all this. But then the square jaw determined that he was from money and that probably a doctor's son. Went through this whole thing where he was discovering who this man, what his MO really was. It was very cool.
Yeah.
Came up with a name. It wasn't Batman, but it was something bat-related. And then Batman clarified that he was Batman. But then he goes, and you're Sherlock Holmes. And Sherlock Holmes goes, how could you tell? Because of your hat. It's just such a cool moment. And there was Watson was there, and it was a nice little twist. And Sherlock Holmes throughout this was, in many ways, Batman and the Demon went off and were doing their home thing, and Holmes had this kind of, I'm a detective, I want to solve this case before Batman. It became kind of this race to prove that he was
the world's greatest detective.
Yeah, right? And it was and he wasn't saying that it was this thirst, showing that he, this inquiry into everything. He needed to know. And he was willing to put himself at risk to figure out the answers. He wanted to solve the mystery and the crime. It was very cool. It was very occult in the storytelling. Craddock was still human in the story. So we got to see how Craddock becomes the Gentleman Ghost, which was a nice little twist to the whole thing, and how you can't really trust demons. It's going to go wrong. But also showing how he would want revenge on Batman. It sets up like previous episodes. You used to remember seeing Gentleman Ghost in the episode before. It actually serves in many ways as a prequel to that episode, showing the history between these characters. So it was fun to see the Demon with his rhyming, and it's funny how this series, at first I thought it was going to be all camp and Silver Agey and just fun, and I didn't have any problem with that. I'm like, oh, this is going to be a fun, accessible series. It is very much that, but this was a deep-rooted, dark episode too, and it just shows that this is a cartoon series that really is going to go anywhere, and the stories being told are going to depend on the writers and the characters that Batman's teaming up with. It's a cool cartoon.
We had a discussion on the forums about about the Brave and the Bold, and one of the comments I made was we've seen characters in Brave and the Bold that before I started reading comics, I didn't even know existed. I didn't know about Red Tornado or the different Blue Beetles, about Black Cat, or Gentleman Ghost, the Demon, or any of those. I didn't know about any of these people, and we're seeing this in this children's cartoon.
Cat?
Yeah.
Wildcat, you mean? Or?
Thank you. Wildcat. Black
Cat's Marvel.
Right. Okay. Yeah, Black Cat I knew about. That Black Cat I knew about. Wildcat. Yeah. You know what I mean.
No. When you were, I was trying, when you said it at first, I'm like, did I miss an episode of Black Cat? Is it a villain or something like that? And I was thinking about something like, oh, he's thinking of Wildcat. No, it really was. I wasn't saying that so much to dispute you. It really was. I was trying to figure out what the heck you were talking about. I'm sorry.
But my point is,
yes, go ahead.
My point is that we're seeing this quote-unquote children's cartoon introduce these characters that they've never even had a chance of even thinking about. And you're seeing these cool characters, and maybe this will be a chance for people to say, hey, I'd like to see more about this, or who is this character?
This is an all-ages program that's animated. And I think that's the funny thing. It was brought up, it was funny in New York. They were talking about some of the books from the Johnny DC line over there, and Dan DiDio was mentioning that he made mention that it was a children's line, and Greg Rucka actually got up, and I'm misquoting this, so please don't. The implication was that it was a children's line and it was geared towards that audience, but Greg Rucka spoke up and said, but this is an adult who's finding pleasure in that line, so obviously it's something for, he was quick to defend that it was for everyone. And it wasn't anything, he didn't say anything, it wasn't a snide comment, but I agree with that. I think a lot of times, and I find myself doing it too, I think of the Johnny DC stuff and I think, oh, this is the kids line. But I would never in a million years drop Tiny Titans, Shazam. I mean, these are books that are really important to me right now. Supergirl. Did you get Supergirl?
Yeah, I'm
Cosmic
getting
Adventures?
Supergirl. That's awesome.
That's a great, fun series. It's just fun. But at any point in time, I don't feel like this is a dumbed-down book. It's rich. It's fun. I have no problem giving it to a kid. But I'm not dropping it because I love it. I'm not picking it up for the show. I'd stop. It's a fun read. I do like the fact, though, that I have no problem taking these things to work and giving to my students and smiling from ear to ear that they're getting the same enjoyment from it that I am. And I think that's the important distinction there is. Our regular monthly comics, you can't necessarily do that with every issue, and they're not geared towards that audience. This is something where we can enjoy it and a younger crowd can enjoy it. So it's all ages. I think that's an interesting distinction. I really like that. And this cartoon is a great example of that as well. I could see a family sitting around, comic fans, or sitting around and watching it and having a good time. My wife's watched a couple of these episodes with me, and she's had a good time with them. So I think it is something that's more accessible. I'm just glad to see this cartoon. I wanted to shout that episode out because I thought the Craddock story, I'm a big JSA fan, and I love seeing, Gentleman Ghost and that rich history in there. And it was great to see his origin brought to life on screen in such an interesting way, and a great demon story.
Yeah.
So, good stuff.
Calling a donut.
I want to put a little disclaimer on the beginning of this Watchmen segment. We don't really swear in it, but we get a little racy in it because of the nature of the fact this is an R-rated film, and there's certainly some things to talk about that are a little crazy. So I wanted to kind of warn parents who normally listen to our show with their loved ones that this particular segment might be one you want to listen to yourself first and decide whether or not you want to listen to it with a family member. Like I said, you can't help on certain segments but to start joking around a little bit, and it's a little outside our norm in that respect. We don't really swear we don't really swear like crazy or anything like that on it, but I just thought it was worth noting just because we get so many nice comments from people who say that they usually like the fact that we avoid that. But this is adult material that we're talking about, so we might as well make sure that people are aware of it.
You have been warned.
Jim, this is going to be a first of a two-part discussion that we're going to have on Watchmen. And it was funny. We had originally talked about this, and you sent me an email, and you had me convinced. I mean, I got to be honest with you. You were sitting there talking about, you said, Sean, let's just do for this one, let's do like a Speeding Bullet style commentary. And I was like, you know what? You're right. We can do something because we've done Watchmen previously on the show. Then I started taking notes. And I got like 14 pages of notes here on the first half of the film. And it was really, as I started thinking about the film and what I liked about it, I started comparing sequences to the book. I was going to do like just the motion comics versus the film because they're two. But then you couldn't help but go back to the original work. And it really is more of my focus is on the original work versus the motion comics. I do have some notes in here where I talk about the motion comics. But I mean, it really does drive me right back to the original work because I pulled out the Absolute and I reread it. And then when I was doing my notes on this, I was actually looking at how I felt about certain scenes in the film and how they compared to the comics. So I think this will be an interesting little discussion. We talked about it at the beginning of the show. I really enjoyed the opportunity to see it with you a second time. After I got past, like, you know, the first time when you go in there, you think as a fan, you can't help but compare and sit there the whole time and watch it and compare to the original graphic novel and then motion comics and stuff, you know, everything else media-wise that you've seen with it. This time, because I already been through that, I just went and enjoyed it. Oh, what a good movie it is.
Yeah, the first time I watched it, I was actually, I kind of had a critic's mindset to me. I went through, I loved the movie. I thought it was great, but I really was analyzing it more than watching it. And the second time I went as a fan, I just had a ball. I was kicking back. We had the high five moment.
Oh, yeah, it was great.
We had the moment.
There was more than one of those, too.
God,
the whole thing, we were just really enjoying it. And that was, I think, the difference was, I think the first time, and I encourage people, if you haven't seen it a second time, do yourself a favor, you know, if you don't go to see it in the theater again, you know, get it on DVD or Blu-ray or rent it or whatever, and see it again, and do yourself a favor and just watch it. Just kind of have fun and just watch it as a film and enjoy that moment. Because I really did have a lot more fun the second time around, and I didn't realize it until I saw it the second time, just how much more enjoyable it was the second time around because of that. When the film opens up, we get that opening with Nixon. And one of the subtle changes and expansions to the original work was that whole opening. But it's pivotal, I think, to the movie.
Yeah.
You know, how much that's developed. Same focus on the fear of nuclear Armageddon. I really like the focus of the film and the original work to ambivalence versus being an agent of change. You've got two extremes, and then you got people that fall like Night Owl who fall somewhere kind of in the middle of the whole argument.
Yeah.
Pat Buchanan and others in the news debate over whether or not the Russians will attack. It reminds me of the classic Dana Carvey, John McLaughlin skit from Saturday Night Live.
Yeah.
Pat Buchanan.
Yeah.
That stuff was great. Does having more powerful weapons escalate weapons creation? Dr. Manhattan is used as a metaphor for this. You know, it's like the bigger the guns, you know, the more people are going to have to try to counter it.
Peace through superior firepower. You know, that's the one motto. The other is no, peace through dialogue and through communication and just understanding. I don't know. I'm more on the superior firepower, but you know, there's arguments on both sides. So, and we see that in this movie. What happens when you have the ultimate weapon, and what happens if you have the ultimate weapon but lose him for a moment?
It's also how do you deal with the realities of human nature, which is an interesting in-your-face commentary on this one. Because going back to what you're saying right now, a lot of the resolution of this film is really flies in the face of what is human nature. What are we compelled to do? It's interesting. The change of a more expanded opening scene with the comedian and the killer was an interesting choice. Jeffrey Dean Morgan as Eddie Blake was brilliant casting. It really felt like the character left off from the page. Some of the casting choices reminded me of the best choices from Sin City, for example. There was another great movie that was from casting. There are moments in this film where the panels seem to come alive, and that's kind of a nice comparison to that as well. I did like the use of like MTV and classic 80s commercials to set the time frame as the killer slowly approached the door. You know, and the Vite commercials that was kind of constantly playing, you know, Unforgettable. You know,
I gotta say, I absolutely loved that Unforgettable was playing throughout that fight sequence. You know, you have this really amazing, high action, intense fight scenes, and in the background you have this great, you know, ballad.
For nostalgia by Vite. Right.
Not only just nostalgia, it just...
Well, that's the name of the product.
Yeah, I know. It's still that song, you think about it just really inspires very positive thoughts. And just like, you think about just how that, melodic that thing is, and just like this wonderful, soft and comforting and casual. And as you're having this horrific battle go on.
You're forgetting one other thing, too. The nostalgia within Eddie's apartment is all that was playing when it's nostalgia by Vite. You've got pictures of Silk Spectre, pictures of her out of costume. You got picture of his daughter on the nightstand that we see later when Rorschach is in there. And then you open up the drawer, and he's got a picture of himself back in the classic days of the comedian. So he's got some, and you could actually see during those moments when that's playing the nostalgia that he feels. It was great. I like seeing that Blake is a veteran fighter. He noticed the shadow under the door and leapt to action. It added drama to this sequence that I think really worked well in the film version, that we got to see that developed in action. What are your thoughts on seeing the shadowy figure of the killer? We don't see him like this in the comic opening. We see a boot or a fist, but never the full figure. And it was funny. It was one of the things that I asked my wife afterwards. I asked her, I said, did you know when you first saw Vite that he was the killer from the fact that you saw him? She said, no, it didn't even do anything in your...
my sister. I went and saw this with my sister, who's never read Watchmen. She only saw this solely because of the hype, around it. And one, she enjoyed the movie. She thought it was a great movie. Two, she didn't know that Vite was the killer, until, it was revealed. They did not, showing the shadowy figure, showing the fight sequence, did not spoil the twist for her.
Cool.
And that was just because the one thing she said, you look at the framework, and she kind of didn't put the framework of Vite in the fight sequence with the Vite that we see throughout. We see him in his business outfit. You see him businessy. You see him kind of in a way look a little wimpy. Kind of he's that smart businessman. You wouldn't think he's a this ultimate killing machine, would you? No,
he's ultra confident.
Yeah,
I think there was something for fans that have seen it before, in the sense that he exudes that confidence you see in the comic book, but there's something about him that adds that mystery edge to him for people that haven't seen it before. I was glad to see that.
Yeah, I definitely love that. And that whole sequence, when I was watching it, I knew the answer, and I was looking, I was like, oh wow, I love the shadow play on him.
And I think the second I saw the figure, I was like, I was so caught up in the fact that, wait, we see him there. But that was because I knew. So it was interesting that you could see that scene in two different ways. I also liked the expanded fight because it added more to Blake's abilities. Just a matter of time, I suppose. It showed that he knew it was coming. He threw the cup, went for the gun. I loved when he threw the cup, it hit the door. The door was 3001 was the apartment number. But then he knocked the one off, and it was the director's chance to put the 300 up there, which I thought was a really cool little Easter egg. I want to talk about the combat in the film in general. These characters hit hard. It felt like comic book action with the slow motion sequences thrown in and the blood splatter, punching through walls and mantles, and sometimes changes and expansions on the source material work to build the characters in a way that is better for film. To me, the sheer power of Vite was developed in the sequence by how much it took for him to kill Blake. I was watching Jackie Chan, Legend of the Drunken Master, over the weekend, and it had that kind of classic martial arts film vibe to it, that whole sequence, especially when the knives that are into the mix, and it was just, ugh.
Everything becomes a weapon in someone who knows, if you're a true warrior, a true killer, anything is a weapon.
Oh, yeah.
And you see him just throw down, but you not only is Eddie able to throw down, but Vite was able to give it, deal with it, catch it, throw it back, catch the the butcher's knife, catch all and it's just, they're equal match. They're both true warriors. They're both true killers. And it was just a wonderful, wonderful battle.
The way that was developed to me was fantastic. It's funny. It's like I said, it's nice to see in this version that I'm getting something a little bit different that adds something to that whole mythos for me. It's a joke. It's all a joke as Blake gets thrown through the window. It's interesting that I took that to mean more than his death. I think he's talking about Vite's plan to fool the world, and it was great to, see that whole thing and know right from the beginning. I did like that we saw the blood drip slowly on his pin to form the iconic image. That was an interesting little way to do it. Just a really well-done variation on the source material. I will say that I missed there being more with the original Minutemen. I totally understand it. I was actually surprised to see the opening credits give us so much of it, though, I was thrilled. I was glad to see that this choice was made. In my opinion, you could never put too much of what was contained within that graphic novel on screen, so I geeked out when any of the references were made.
And once again, throughout this whole movie, the musical choices just were so spot on, perfect. When they're doing those flashing and they're throwing the it had that little happy kind of, you're bopping and bebopping as these images, even when Mothman's being taken away in a straitjacket and they show Dollar Bill dead, there's still
what was the da-da-da-da? We were doing Dylan's These Times They Are Changing.
but it wasn't, I know.
You
know what I mean?
Yeah.
It still had that upbeat to it. It wasn't, down,
Yes, it was.
No.
Dylan's These Times Are Changing. You got to listen to that song again.
No, it had more of a, step to it.
Yeah. No, it's actually, do that down that you just did again.
No.
That's exactly the beat of it.
That's not that. No. It was more upbeat than that.
No,
dude, I could sit there and hang out with my buddies, sing that in a bar, throwing back a couple drinks. That is okay. Yeah, it's not dun, 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 dun. Okay, I will give you that.
Okay,
that it's
that's
not
what, well,
but it's not a death march.
I guess nobody here got to see the visual that you were doing. You were doing the da 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 da.
Okay, yeah, okay, it wasn't that, but it was a friendly, fun song. Talking about the times are changing,
right.
But it's still. I could see, but the time they are changing. You're hanging out with your buddies, swinging a beer glass, just enjoying life.
Yeah. But from that end of it, he's basically saying that unless you get with the program, you're going to be left behind because the times are a-changing.
Well, there's the darker undertone behind it, but it's
that's
not...
the whole theme of the song.
But it's not told in the time they are a-changing.
Well,
it's like...
Bob Dylan couldn't do that. But that's
but see, I think that's also part of it, because it is Dylan's voice going with the day like this. There is a melodic...
But it's a darker tune.
It's a darker lyrics, a darker theme, but the beat, the music, the flow, it's not... If you don't really pay attention to the words, you wouldn't think it is this really dark and nasty song.
But if you take a look at the scenes in the opening sequence, they start off with these like upbeat moments with these characters, and they shift into the negativity of how things change for these upbeat characters. These are your classic Silver Agey style heroes in their presentation, especially when we see their original picture. But then we slowly get to see what's happening with, we have Silk Spectre on the side of the plane that gave the Black Hawks vibe. But then we see Silhouette, the death of Dollar Bill. And I kept thinking to myself that these characters would make an interesting prequel film. But I honestly doubt we'll see something like that because of the fact that this thing started tanking the second or third week.
Yeah, I know.
Unfortunately, it was doing great. But it's hats off for the cinematography because they all looked like they belonged in the filtering choices and the lighting of that sequence. But even when we got to Sally's retirement party, it took place clearly after the rape, but the happy look between Eddie and Sally. But then later on, you see Mothman being carried away, and just just how time changed over that end. We see John F. Kennedy with Dr. Manhattan. It was weird that you would see these sequences of these characters that are in these new status quos, like Dr. Manhattan meeting the president, framed by all of the older heroes either retiring or having horrible things like, Silhouette being killed with her lover. Yeah. I mean, these weren't happy moments framed in this whole thing. So as the times change, you get kind of left behind in the dust and fall apart. So your happiest heroes, I guess, it just didn't come off as a bright sequence for me. I understand what you're saying, though. Like I guess the way you were presenting it originally for me threw me off.
Misspoke when I first...
I understand more.
You know what I'm saying? Okay, you know what I'm saying now. So yeah, and to be honest, it even adds more to the argument of the choice of the Dylan song, because it is telling a bad story, there are nasty things are coming, but it doesn't do like the Edmund Fitzgerald. This wasn't the Legend of the Edmund Fitzgerald.
No, you're right,
and that's what I was getting at. It told it in a lighter way, but he still told a darker thing.
The way it was confusing me is you were making it seem like
I know.
I thought from the way you were presenting it that you were thinking this was like some kind of upbeat, happy, bar swinging song, and I'm like, well, no, it's really not. If you listen to the lyrics and the whole tone of the whole thing, it's kind of like, you either change with the times, you're going to get left behind with a horrible mess. Which was interesting. The Sally's retirement party was an important scene for me because it did set a stage for an important thing to show that after the rape, There was a happy time between the two of them. There was kind of a knowing look between the two of them that it I don't think got developed as well later in the film because they left out some bits, and we'll have to talk about that when we eventually get to it. So I thought that scene was really pivotal to see the second time around, those two smiling at each other with her pregnant. Just kind of like laying the tone here, like, huh? They actually did have some happy moments. My own personal theory is that Mothman was locked up for wearing that outfit. I mean, let's be honest. Those wings served no functional purpose. They can't be good in a fight. I mean, the outfit alone says lock me up and give me a good talking to, or take me into a corner and beat me up.
I don't know. It makes perfect sense to me.
Yeah, but I love that we see a dollar bill's cape caught in the door.
And that is... I still, I shouldn't laugh, but I do laugh at the thought of behind it. Because I'm like, I just always am drawn back to The Incredibles, where they had that sequence where, Mr. Incredible wants to have a cape. Like, oh no, you remember so-and-so? And they go through the list of the heroes who died because their cape got stuck. And sure enough, Dollar Bill, his cape gets stuck and he gets gunned down.
And it does show that I completely misunderstood you, though, because being honest, the way you were saying it was upbeat like that, I'm like, are you watching the same opening sequence that I was? What was happy about that? Silhouette dead with her girlfriend? I mean, like, dude. Well, I totally, completely understand you now. That's why I asked, though, because I wanted to understand where you're coming from. Now, what was the tripod hanging over Silhouette and her girlfriend as they lay dead? Jim, you're a man of the world and a noted gymnast. You got to know what that was for.
That wasn't them. That was to hold the camera to take the picture of the dead bodies.
Okay.
That's a crime scene thing, and I don't know.
I knew you'd know.
Yeah, it's because of current film they don't need to do that because of camera developments. But back in the 50s, they had to build the tripod directly over the body to get the good overhead shot.
Just to show, because I was clueless to that.
You thought it was something freaky deaky.
I'm like, what is this tripod for? What is going on in there? Young Rorschach in the opening credits. I really liked seeing that as well. Just a little moment with that. It was nice that we got to see some moments from the film. Seeing them visually, like Dollar Bill's death. You don't ever see that in the comics. Some of those things were developed straight from Hollis Mason's book that we never got to see visually, and I was glad to see that. I wish we had the dialogue from the book with Dr. Manhattan and Kennedy. It's not a knock because it really isn't a plot element, but I was glad to see that they at least shook hands. But that whole segment between them, about heroism and things like that was really great. As Kennedy was killed, I think back to the fact that John knew he would be killed by Blake. If you could see into the future, would you attempt to change it? I'd be a terrible precog, dude. I'd be known as the time blender because I'd be stirring things up all the time to try and prevent things that probably would need to happen for forward development for individuals and groups. I couldn't imagine knowing a good person, even a mediocre person was going to die and not do something about it. Heck, Jim, I'd even save us average folk.
Well, that's good to know.
Yeah.
I was expecting I'd save people except for you, Jim. I was waiting for that. I'm like, come on.
I said I'd save us. I put us in the same.
Yeah, I know. I saw that. I appreciate that.
Yeah. Hey, dude, I'd save us. Yeah.
Yeah, and here's the thing. I'm kind of, of the opposite. And I'm going to upset people here, but
no.
I would, if I knew Kennedy was going to die, I probably would let it happen because there's been so many stories and so many things that I've read, just like alternate what if Kennedy lived. And if Kennedy had lived, there's a lot of people saying that, just the U.S. involvement, he was there's a lot of negative comments that he wasn't the strong president that the media made him out to be, that he really was, it really was an idiot.
It was the Camelot ideal that was put in that time.
Yeah, and it's and to be honest, I'm not even going to say that I know this for a fact, but it's just I've started reading more stuff about like Kennedy, about Nixon, about these other presidents, and there's a lot of commentary that Kennedy was a very weak international president. He was well liked and he was popular because the media made him popular, not because he was the right man for the job. And had he had his job even longer, who knows, what kind of bad shape the U.S. would be. The U.S. needed a different president than Kennedy.
But in that era, he was a very good domestic president as far as motivation and building people up in that. I'm not saying you're wrong. That's not to dispute you. I'm agreeing with you, but I'm saying I think that's why we've got this kind of Camelot version of him in the sense that it was just, I don't think you could do a Kennedy today. I think the closest thing was a Bill Clinton. And I think Kennedy would have wound up in the same place with affairs and things like that.
Yeah, there's a lot of problems that come from
because a lot of the stories about
yeah.
Kennedy too talks about there was some things going on with him. During that time, there's all kinds of rumors and things, and
not rumors. There's confirmations.
Oh no, I know. That's what I'm saying is, but beyond even the confirmations, there's rumors that go beyond that. So, this guy was, he makes Clinton look like an amateur.
Yeah.
So it's interesting to see that. We go on a little bit further. I probably should put a little disclaimer on this. This movie was an R-rated movie. So because of that, there's going to be moments that we're going to talk about. We try to keep the show as clean as possible, but there's certain things that we're going to need to talk about at a certain point in time. And I'm going to wait till we get to them in a moment because I want to finish going through the credits, but there's certain things we're going to need to talk about. And it involves Dr. Manhattan.
Yeah.
Which we'll discuss that in a a little bit. But I just want to say that we can't avoid that. So I don't know. Nobody could.
No. That's kind of a hard one to miss.
Yeah, I'm surprised nobody got hurt making that movie. But before we get to that, I'm officially scared to be part of a peace and love demonstration. Public execution. I'm glad they set the tone for this world in the credits. This was where we started to see that there's a time shift. This is no longer our world. Things happen differently here. Andy Warhol's Marilyn becomes Andy Warhol's Night Owl. I loved that tiny little detail. And then we saw Ozymandias in the background. It was interesting.
Yeah, him hanging out with Mick Jagger and Bowie and all that. Yeah,
it's good stuff. First man on the moon looks over to see Dr. Manhattan. Imagine if man's great achievements were overshadowed by a superpowered hero doing them first. Would that breed some ambivalence or even animosity that we've kind of seen in the film?
Yeah, the whole thing with the race to the moon was just this moment of pride.
Sure.
It was like, it's, the USA chant. It's the, God bless America. Flags are waving. We are the masters of now the universe. We're the first ones out there. Yeah, they were able to orbit Earth. They were able to, Russians had their first orbit, fine, but they couldn't land on the moon. We landed on the moon and brought them home safely.
Yeah.
It's...
And the most he can say when he gets up there on the moon is, we got Rogaine, you don't, Papa Smurf.
Yeah.
It's like... I mean, it's like the dude's already there. It's like, what are you going to do? I mean, spend all that money and, hey, one small step for weight. Oops. La, 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 la. I mean, it's like, wow. Why bother trying to progress as a race when this superpowered creature can do it all just with an instant thought? How would we truly react as a people if this guy was running around? All right. Now, Trojans changed the name of the Magnum to the Manhattan after this movie. What? Now, okay. I didn't have a big deal. Like, there's been a lot of controversies. People who never read Watchmen, were they doing, him being naked for shock value? I really don't think so, because if you take a look at all the scenes where he was naked and you look at the original graphic novel, they directly correspond to where he was naked in the original graphic novel. One exception. In the original graphic novel, males all had pride. Because he was a very tiny man. Okay? You can go over afterwards and say, I got one up on Dr. Manhattan. Right? You see the film, and the dude's hanging an oak. All right, like, the comic books, like for any male, is the feel-good comic book. It's 12 issues of, okay, Mr. Blue Guy, I got you in one area. You can understand why Silk Spectre would go to Night Owl. I mean, it's like, dude's got to be better than that. Something happened to him in the whole radiation thing, It's like a cold shower forever. Like I said, I couldn't resist talking about it because it was like, it is a major distinction.
Yeah.
Like, you got to wonder who made the choice, because obviously...
I'm going to say the actor who portrays Dr. Manhattan.
Who wouldn't?
Oh, dudes, hold on.
Yeah.
If I got to do full frontal...
No, I got to be tripping over it and stuff like that. Like, I'm getting dates after this. But was really, we couldn't resist talking about this because it really was. I will say this, that I credit them to. They stuck to nude scenes were based on the fact that they appeared in the comic book that way. And there were a lot of people who were like, I've heard a lot of reviewers. I'm not talking about comic book fans. I'm talking about reviewers who are just film reviewers who are talking about, and people who just saw the film, who were talking about the nude scenes and saying that, that was a little over the top or shock value. I'm kind of like, no, it really was, all joking aside, it really was true to what was done in the comic book. And I give them credit for sticking to, you could have clothed him during that segment. You could have just said, we're not going to go that route. But I think it fit showing that common things like, being clothed and being ashamed of being naked, that is a human trait, were gone to him. It shows that those emotional ties were something that as he turned into Dr. Manhattan and slowly kind of drifted away from humanity, he lost touch with those as well. They're things that we all kind of naturally are, they're defining human characteristics that people don't, unless they're, you're at a nudist camp, people don't walk around like that. And I thought it was an interesting tone setting choice that stuck with what was originally done in the film. So, all kidding aside, but I couldn't help but talk about that.
I never thought that's the way you'd go that one. I was expecting, some comments, but
New group picture. Why do you think they left out Captain Metropolis? I guess, I'll save this for later, but I think there's a dialogue that has to be discussed during that original meeting that I think there's something missing that I thought having Captain Metropolis there really worked in the original graphic novel. I don't know why they chose not to do that. And we'll talk about that when we get to that particular scene, but, the first team meeting is exactly where I was thinking to myself, I'm like, why did they do that? Because you've got a Captain Metropolis cast, so why wouldn't you have done it? I don't know. Both cases, though, the entire cast looked great. Kudos to the costume department. They stuck very true to the original work. Slight little changes that made it work on film, but
they had to personalize it a little bit and just make stuff that would work better in live action than it would have, from the pages.
Nixon gets in for a third term on the fear of worldwide destruction during the Cold War. This fear breeds the idea that the police are to be trusted over the vigilantes. This who watches the Watchmen movement kicks off. But I do think it's certain things like, what Dr. Manhattan's doing, stuff like that. People get a little freaked out. It's kind of like, whoa. It shows a different take on the whole vigilante thing. When you've got this superpowered person in there, what does that mean and how does that change things? And it was funny how that sequence of events escalated people's fear of vigilantes. You wonder if it wasn't kicked off by Dr. Manhattan himself. So, the arrival of the Superman. Yeah. Back to the murder. The camera pans up to the classic scene of the detective looking out the window, about to begin analyzing the crime scene. It looks straight out of the book. I absolutely loved that. Just seeing that, I'm like, oh, that's great. Plate glass window, his build, shaking hands with Nixon. Was this a robbery or a setup? I did like that the clues led them to the possibility of something more. Totally drew me into the sequence of events. Rorschach's journal, I have to laugh. I wonder if we're ever going to see commentary that James Earl Haley's voice was too deep when he was Rorschach. And I'm purely joking about the criticism leveled at Bale in Dark Knight. Or maybe you in our opening ad. But I gotta say, this guy, Haley, was brilliant. He got into the role, brought Rorschach to life. This is one intimidating guy. He's an important character to get just right. He was easily my favorite character when I originally read the book because he's the street-level guy, which I always seem to latch on to. He's the Batman-style character. I will say it was funny. As I'm getting older, I don't know what it says about me, Rorschach was like, I have a fondness for Rorschach, but Night Owl I appreciated a lot more now than I did when I originally read it in high school. Because the original graphic novel came out when I was in high school. Yeah. I was all about Rorschach. Seeing the movie, I had a lot more fondness for Night Owl. So I don't know, that obviously just shows where am I at in my life right now, that I'm like, I'm noticing this character in a whole different, like, Night Owl's pretty cool.
Hey, I salute Night Owl.
Yeah, hey, dude's doing all right. So just shows you in a different place. This city's afraid of me. I've seen its true face. The streets are extended gutters, and the gutters are full of blood. When the drains finally scab over, all the vermin will drown. I mean, that is sheer intensity.
Yeah. Oh, God. I tell you. Yeah, they really, just the casting on Rorschach was just so amazing. And it got, when they first were going through the casting, they were originally talking Simon Pegg. Was going to maybe play Rorschach. I was like, oh, that'd be awesome. Then when they announced him, I'm like, oh, come on. Oh. And I was very worried that they were going to ruin Rorschach. 100% eat my words on that.
Couldn't be better.
And here's the thing. I was wondering how my sister was going to react to Rorschach. And that was one of the first things I asked her, hey, what do you think of the characters? And she absolutely loved them. She's like, that is a supporting actor in a comic book movie who should get an Oscar.
Sure.
She said that was what a supporting role that is such a dominant character in the movie that they stand out and their presence and just they become this other entity that is born and developed in this movie. That was just a powerful performance. Now, I don't think he'll get an Oscar nom because he's still alive, but he should. He honestly should get something. He should get some recognition for his portrayal.
Yeah, it was great. It was really... He won't.
Yeah.
I mean, it's kind of a duh. But I'm sure it'll get something for cinematography. And
I'm hoping
that seems
music
to be like
too.
kind of the throw it to the comic book film.
Yeah.
And you know what? In fairness, most of your comic films genuinely deserve that. And this one certainly, visually, it's stunning. So I shouldn't say that in a negative light. But it seems to be... And I think that in some ways takes away from those categories for me because I'm like... Well, you're really like forgetting like some of these other roles that are wonderful. And you're right, he deserves it for this. He nailed it. I mean, talk about an interpretation of a character that came head on and came to life. He took a two-dimensional character and made him three-dimensional, which is a testament to the original work and how well that character was crafted to the scripting and then to how that was carried over into the film. It's it's great. He sees everyone as fat, lazy, and more interested in luxuries and turning their heads than actually improving the human condition, which is interesting when we talk about later, were they right or wrong in their choice with how they decided to let things go. And it's interesting that he has a conundrum later because his concept of having to be with truth and having to stick with uncompromising,
no compromise even in the face of Armageddon.
Yeah, it's great stuff. So this movie makes you think on so many levels all the way through, the same way the book does. My wife made a comment after we walked out. I asked her, "How did you like it?" Because I was curious if she even would. Because, I mean, obviously, I'm the superhero fan. She got to live with me all day long. So it's kind of like, I talk about this stuff all the time. And I was really excited to see this with her because I wanted to see her reaction to this. And she commented on, how we talk about how dense a read it is. Her exact words were, there was a lot going on in that movie. I liked it. It was very different. So she was positive about it. She really enjoyed it. But it was clear, like the same thing we say after the first time reading Watchmen. Remember, we did original Watchmen episode. We said you got to read this thing multiple times to get it all. I think this film, too, I'll be interested to see when the Blu-ray comes out and we can watch it together again, how she feels about that. If the second time through there's a different kind of enjoyment for her through experiencing that. I really had a lot of fun.
Yeah. One thing my sister said, and she just nailed it, she said, this is a good cult film. Mm-hmm. It will have its cult following, but it's not one of those cult, really bad cult movies that only the people who are into it like. This is a good movie that will have its solid following audience. The regular, average, everyday watcher is going to either be turned off on the length or turned off on the complications behind it. They're not going to give it the second watch through. They're not going to give that chance to dive into it. That's where it's going to lose in the long run.
This is where I think it's going to be an interesting thing, though. When you talk about cult films, one of the things that makes them a cult film is that they seem to have staying power. In the sense that the film seems to, through re-releases and things like that, the audience tends to follow it. And it tends to pick up new people along the way that it wouldn't have picked up before because of the fact that people who liked it keep talking about it. So it'd be interesting to see if this film, long-term, has some serious longevity as a cult film, like the book did for example, where the book is kind of one of those we still talk about today as this epic piece of literature today. You know, this was released back in the 80s. We were in high school. This for us is, you know, like 20 years ago. It's like, you know.
Here's the one thing. I know for a fact I have 3 people at work who saw this solely because I was talking about it. And because, you know, I said, when I told them, I'm like, hey, this is a long movie. This is a deep, complex movie. I'm like, I've seen it twice. I've read the graphic novel over like 6 times. And it was still, you know, took time for me to flesh it out and to digest it. And they went in with the mindset, okay, you know, and the one person I work with, you know, when I talked to her, you know, today, because, when I talked to her on Monday, because she'd seen it over the weekend, I'm like, well, what'd you think? And she's like, I don't know yet. I'm still thinking about it. She's like, you know, it was one of the, she was still digesting it. And she saw it over the weekend, you know, and she was still digesting it. And she's actually thinking about maybe seeing it a second time. Because I told her, I'm like, hey, I saw it my second time.
That says a lot, though.
And she's thinking about seeing it a second time. So that's
whether she does or doesn't, even that's even on the table. If she thought it was god awful,
right? And
she wouldn't even. She'd be like, no, there's no way I'd ever go see that again.
Yeah. So
it's not. That's not even. So it's interesting. I do think we as fans need to support this film as much as possible. I'm not saying that we have to go see it 85 times in order to make it make money.
Go see it 85 times.
Okay. No, what I mean, though, is I think we should be ambassadors for this. If you liked it, I'm not saying lie to people about it. If if you're listening to this and you're like, guys, I completely disagree with you. It wasn't my cup of tea at all. Okay, that's fine. But I'm saying if you liked it, tell a friend. Tell them why you liked it, like you did. You know, where you we're preparing people for, hey, this is what you're going to go into, but go in there and enjoy it and see it. It's something unique. It's something different. Because that was my wife's first thing out of it. It was different. And that was one of the things she liked about it, was the fact that it wasn't Spider-Man. It wasn't Batman. I think that's also the hard sell for the film. It's not Spider-Man. It's not Batman. This is a new commodity for people. They don't know who these people are. So I think that's something that's... Go ahead.
Well, it's funny, because you mentioned it's not Batman. I had a massive geek rant, because someone was saying, oh, yeah, they got that Night Owl guy. He's kind of like Batman. I'm like, no, he's not Batman. He's this version of Blue Beetle. And I kind of went on to this whole tirade about how Night Owl isn't Batman. He's Beetle, and started comparing Ted Kord and Night Owl, and just comparing the different characterization.
Was this after they saw the film?
No, they hadn't even seen the movie,
so they never went.
Right? Yeah, I don't think so. I probably turned them off, but it was just it was one of those things where my geek flag just started flying and I couldn't shut up.
Right. So this is like, what not to do when people ask you about Watchmen. Yeah, because the second you said that, I'm like, oh man, we just lost a potential cha-ching for the ticket sales.
Actually, I don't know. Maybe they'll see it. Who knows? But I doubt it.
Next time, be a little more subtle. Yeah. just say, well, you might want to see the movie. You might see something a little different. That's your line.
Oh, okay.
I'll coach you. Call me up next time. Just say, hey, Sean, I don't know what to say. I'll tell you. We got to do that as comic fans, because I think, what the problem is? In the reverse situation where I was there, I would be doing the same thing. So I'm not condemning you. It's one of those things, though, I think, where we need to do the buddy system. Whenever we try to be ambassadors towards anything comic-related, you need to call a friend and say, okay, dude, you're not here. Tell me what to say in like 1 or 2 sentences.
You're like my AA sponsor.
Yeah, it's like,
talk me down, man. Talk me down.
Yeah, we are. We really are. We're all these people that we're in the comic book AA. It's like, because I really want this person to see it, because I think they'd like it. They like, they typically like epics.
Deep breaths. Calm down. Calm down. Take it easy.
Yeah, dude, just 2 sentences. Here's what you're gonna say. It's he's a little bit different. You'll see it in the film. That's what you do. So it's great. Okay. But like you said, that's what cell phones are for. Speed dial.
Okay. Well, tomorrow at work, I'll re-coach them. I'll re-talk to them.
As Rorschach searches for clues, he saw the pictures that we were talking about earlier. What superhero fan doesn't want a secret closet or a sliding wall? I would love something like that to be my comic room or our recording studio. Could you imagine us sneaking into a secret room to record the show? Talk about setting the mood.
Dude, man, we're going to dig a hole in your basement and we're building a...
I told my wife that the other day when we, after we came home. Did we discuss this over dinner?
Yeah.
Where I said I got a shovel ready for the basement for when Night Owl was going out in his ship. I'm like, honey, I want one of those.
Oh, yeah.
The build to the reveals in this film were really well handled in the soundtrack, because the music, we were talking earlier about the Dylan song. The music, and actually the actual soundtrack that was actually throughout there, the orchestra music that was playing all the way through, was really well done. There's very little variation from the comic, and his mask is really creepy. I wish there was time to bring in the origin of the mask. Again, not a criticism because, it's not necessary for the big picture of the story, but I thought it was a cool way to show that this kid used what was around him to create this persona, which I thought was a cool development in the story. I did like in the motion comic, very similar to the film, the mask moves. You actually see it in the motion comic as well. So it's something with the motion comic release, you actually get to see that in the visual art.
Yeah, my sister commented on the masks. That was something where she really wanted more information on that mask, and I told her what the background behind it. She's like, we both understood why they couldn't put it in there because the movie was already 2.5 hours long.
Right.
Where would you put it in there? And that's but yeah.
I was glad to see some Hollis Mason. I'm excited to see that DVD release. It's actually, I was going to say later this month. The DVD release is like tomorrow, or it's today. I think it was Tuesday. I think that one was released. I ordered it, and I think it's coming for me tomorrow. That it's got the Tales of the Black Freighter, which is animated, I believe.
Yes.
And then Under the Hood, which I'm not sure what that is. Is that going to be animated as well?
I don't know if it's animated or
what
story read. I don't know.
I'm curious though. So, but I know the animated Tales of the Black Freighter in itself. But having that, because I love Hollis Mason, I love the character, that whole rich development. Watch the language, kid. This is the left hook that floored Captain Axis. Remember? Kind of a statement that this is not the Silver Age anymore. Yet he has that same endearing quality that Jay Garrick does, for example. He's the guy that you can't help but like. This established that Dryburgh was going to be the everyman. He's been pulled into this ambivalence that many in society seem to be going through, but you can tell that this is a point of sadness for him. Great action, great acting by Patrick Wilson. I just thought this was just another good casting. When they walked outside, it was again straight out of the comic. And actually, talking about the motion comic, this scene flowed much smoother than the motion comic, which was also excellent. But I thought this was a scene that was kind of awkward because there was no dialogue that extended the motion comic the way it did, so it felt a little awkward in that. And it's one of the few flaws that I found in the motion comic where it really felt clunky. But it was an interesting little adaptation. Do you miss it? And Jim, I didn't believe either one of them when they were acting no, they don't.
But no way. And it was supposed to be that way. And I love the fact that you could see that doubt, that hesitation. You could see it in their eyes. Not, their mouths are saying one thing, but their eyes, their heart, their soul are saying something completely different.
But we fixed some obsolete models, especially on the Mason Automotive sign. It was like the home run to that point, which was great. Another mood-setting thing that totally fit the tone that... we see later with Night Owl. Dryburgh in this one really I'm like, yeah, Dan Dryburgh. I was so waiting for the classic break in scene with Rorschach, where he kicks the door in. He would be a tough guy to have as a friend. I think we all have those friends who have some elements of rudeness on the outside, but we know that there is something about the core of who they are that keeps them as a friend. I think we've got multiple friends like that. But,
It's kind of like, that annoying friend that, wakes you up in the middle of the night. Jim, tell me a story. Or when you're in the bathroom, you hear this like, so, Jim, what are you thinking about the comic, huh?
Hey, Jim, the things I do for art.
Eat your beans, okay?
I like them this way. I think it's why this friendship works, though. He's that one friend we all have that doesn't quite get along with your other friends, and I get along with your other friends, but he helps you round off in a way that the relationship needs to be protected because he rounds you off. He makes you something more. And he does that for Night Owl. He's that person. Like, Night Owl's thirsting for that life again. You can see it. The whole scene with the button and the human bean juice, straight from the comic. Dryburgh takes confidence during those moments where you almost see Night Owl in his face when he's asking and inquiring about the whole thing. Another well-acted sequence. You see the shift into a different character. We talk about Bruce Wayne and Batman when Bruce Wayne's in his public mode, and Batman. I'm not saying, again, this is a different character. You see him shift into Night Owl mode, and superheroes do have that. They have their superhero persona, a confidence that comes over them in costume that you see here. Robbery, political killing, I think Rorschach came to him to play out the thoughts in his own mind, to eliminate possibilities, to refocus himself. And that was the night, it's detective work right now. I need that person to play off of.
It's, the bouncing the ideas off your partner. Even though Rorschach, now doesn't like having a partner, he flies solo, it's still, you need that sometimes. It's just voicing it out loud, just to think things completely through. That I completely ate that up as that's what you do with a good partner.
He's becoming convinced that it might be someone targeting costume vigilantes. The detective looks at everyone, including Hollis Mason, who wrote a book with derogatory comments about Blake. Very real investigative techniques. Attack on one of us is an attack on all of us. When Night Owl says that Kovacs wasn't that sentimental, I think deep down that he is. He sees Dan as a partner. His social skills are just terrible due to his upbringing. As I've revisited the work, I found him to be so much more deep a character than I did when I originally read it. When I first read him on the surface, he was like this badass character and all that stuff. But you get down deep, he's also the hurt kid who's longing for a friendship in there as well. And Dan's that friend. There is that part of him that has that.
He just needs a hug.
He does need a hug. He does. The commentary on a normal life drew me in. This city is just plain filthy. The corruption, killings, etc. A mask isn't necessarily what you wear. A mask is the way you hide yourself because you believe it is what you're supposed to do. At least I'm not the one still hiding behind a mask. No, you're hiding in plain sight.
Yeah.
Came here often when we were partners. Yeah, those were great times. What happened? You quit. And it was talk about the moment where you shove the knife in and turn. Because a Night Owl is a character, again, we go back to that scene where we've established now, this guy doesn't totally want to be out of the game. We saw it come over his face during the commentary. It added to me the depth that if he truly wanted to walk away, why keep all that equipment? Why risk being found out? There is a part of him at his core that misses who he truly is, misses being an agent of change. I do like that part of the message here is we all need to wake up and take a more active role in society. Doesn't mean to be vigilantes, but it does mean that in our own ways we all have the ability to have a positive impact on the world around us. Well, it's one person. I ate this up because it is something that you can walk out of this film and just say to yourself, comic books gave me something that, it's... Comic books do that at their core. They give us that, I go back to your hoorah things. They give you that kind of rally cry. That's something that just, it gives you a message that you can take away from them. And that was one of the messages that I've always gotten from this. That you should take action. You should do something. You shouldn't just be ambivalent. Why do you think that Dryburgh visits Veidt himself first in the film? Why do you think that happened? Any ideas why they chose that choice?
I don't know. Only thing I was thinking is he still didn't have the strength. He still didn't have the strength that he was and who he was. So he goes to the person that is strong, is successful. He was looking for.
Why do you think they made the shift? Is I guess what I'm saying. Because if you remember the comic, it was Rorschach that confronted Veidt.
I think it made more sense that it would be Dan, and this is Dan's way of getting Dan into it. Like Rorschach wouldn't go to Veidt, that would be like that.
But if you think about it, Rorschach would go to Veidt the same way that he went to Dr. Manhattan and Silk Spectre. He was going to everybody who was on the original Gangbusters, Watchmen in this particular film. So I guess I'm not. This isn't a criticism of the film. I'm just kind of curious as to, do you think it was just to try the scene a little bit of a different way, to play it a different way?
Yeah,
it wasn't. It was a great scene. I'm not. So this isn't a criticism. I was just curious as to why do you think they had Dan do it in the film instead of Rorschach?
I think it's to kind of show Dan getting back into the swing of things, to show Rorschach trying to get Dan back into the swing of things. Rorschach now doesn't have to go to Veidt because Dan took care of that, so he's going to take care of the other thing, kind of like forcing him to be his partner.
I guess I wanted to see Rorschach playing with the dolls at the desk and twisting the heads and mangling Veidt the way he did in the comic, which was really great.
I didn't need that. That was the thing. I liked the way this played out. I thought it was good.
Don't take my question wrong. I'm not saying it was a bad scene or that I disliked it in any way, shape, or form. I was just curious as to they stayed so true to so much. Seemed like an interesting, and it didn't actually change the sequence all that much. And it did do some interesting things in the sense that I think it established the concept of aren't you afraid that the other members of the Watchmen were going to resent you because of the fact that you've made money? And it sets him as this humanitarian character, which is his smokescreen that he's putting on to fool those closest to him. That he's doing all this for a renewable energy source when the renewable energy source is actually his master plan that he's setting up. So it's interesting how right out in the open he is trying to cover up everything with this sequence. And I do think that having this sequence filmed this way does set up more the tone that he's a good guy and he's just doing good things. If we make resources infinite, the fear that breeds war is obsolete. It's a brilliant way to take the spotlight off him. I did like this sequence because it shows that Dan wanted to follow up Rorschach's lead. Again, establishing the fact that he isn't totally out of the game. There's a part of him that wants to get back in, and he's going to kind of follow up anyway. It still establishes that he views the comedian and Rorschach in the same category for the way they chose to live their lives. You know, the whole Nazi comment and stuff like that.
Yeah.
It also served to establish that John can't be everywhere at once. If nuclear war happened, he may destroy 99% of them, but the 1% would be enough to destroy everything. So it adds more strength to Veidt's motivations for what he does later in the film. So it was, so I don't want people to take it the wrong way. I figured we'd throw it out there as a discussion point because it is a distinct difference for how it was presented in the comic book because it was two different characters, and that did change completely. It was a very bright tone in this presentation where Rorschach's visit was a lot darker, especially when you see Veidt looking out the window at that moment in time. In the comic book, he's portrayed as a darker presentation.
And here's the thing. I didn't reread Watchmen before seeing the movie.
Uh-huh.
So when I actually was watching it in the movie, I thought that's actually how it happened. Mm-hmm. I actually, it wasn't until after watching the movie I reread the Watchmen. Oh yeah, that's it switched around. And you're talking about just that darker image. I remember when I was reading the Watchmen, the first time, that's, I think, where I started suspecting,
right,
that he was a bad guy. Whereas here, he's played off as very positive, very light. I'm like, okay.
And I liked it because of the sense that it did show his commitment to putting up the smokescreen. So I wasn't a knock. I just thought it was an interesting scene to talk about because there's a huge difference there in tone. So the expanded break into the research facility where John works was really dynamic. The flabby failure sits whimpering in his basement. It's clear Rorschach went there in hopes of something more. I think if he knew what Dan did in the earlier sequence, it would ease his mind a bit. But I still think he would see it as Dan holding back.
Definitely would see it as that.
The sequence did establish his lack of respect for everyone who retired as a crime fighter. In his eyes, it's something that drives you at your core, and they all betrayed that never compromising. That's who they are. So he talks about Silk Spectre and Hollis Mason. It's with venom. It's with a lot of venom. The sequence with John, Laurie, and Rorschach, where we first get to see John take up the whole screen. No, Jim, I'm not talking about that. I'm talking about the fact that he could make his whole body the size of a skyscraper. I'm actually glad this film was stuck in development for so long because I think we do benefit from today's technology. When he says he can't see the future to tell them who the killer is, there was this great moment that showed how disconnected he is. He matter-of-factly says that nuclear holocaust is more than likely the cause. I wish more of the conflict over the death of the comedian and the rape had been established before this, because I liked seeing John remove Rorschach from the building, but I think the original comic made his removal more powerful. John was still disconnected over it when Laurie was ranting, but I think the later reveals about the comedian were much more powerful with the way the original work established it. So it's interesting. I can't help but compare those two scenes. It would have been weird to do it in the film because it wasn't established. So it's not a knock on how the film did it. They had to do it this way because none of that was established. So it would have made no sense at all.
Yeah.
But it was interesting. I'm like, I wanted to see her go off on him about that. I'm glad that through John's time demonstration that we do start to get a tease as to the relationship that Silk Spectre and Eddie had through the flashback, because that was an interesting little twist there as well. Now, if my girl's going out to dinner with another fella, the energy crisis would just plain out have to wait.
Well, hey, he's got more important things to do.
Yeah. As my wife said, she's a very pretty girl. What's going on there? It's like...
Hey, you mentioned that. There's one thing that I'm really glad with her casting because, she's very pretty and she was wonderful to see in the movie and she did an absolutely fabulous job in the role. But I wish they would have had someone just a little bit older than her. Because for me, when I read the comic, I took it that she and Dan were the same age. In the movie, when I look at those two together, Dan is definitely older than her. And just a couple years older, is what I really needed her to be. Now, not knocking the performance, thought it was absolutely wonderful. And this was something I noticed when I saw the pictures and the images, when they saw who was casting, that's what I saw. But when the actual movie came out, I wasn't disappointed with the performance, but I don't know.
And they do establish through the dialogue that much time has passed.
Right, but in her appearance, she doesn't look that old. She doesn't look as old as she looked in the comic for me.
She takes really good care of herself.
Yeah.
Yeah. I agree with you. I mean, it was interesting. I didn't think it was a knock on the casting, though. I thought she was great. I think her casting was great. I thought she did a great job in the action sequences, the dialogue. She convinced me that she was somebody who'd been through a lot.
Yeah,
I agree with what you're saying. I'm not knocking what you're saying, though. You're right. It wasn't something that, being honest, that was not something that, when you're saying it right now, I'm like, no, he's right. It wasn't something that bothered me.
Yeah, and it was only something that bothered me before I saw her do the role. Once I saw the movie, it's like with Rorschach, with Early. Before I saw him play the role, I was worried about it. When I saw the pictures of her playing the role, I was like, what? Oh, she's way too young. No, they're ruining this. Oh, then I was thinking, are they going to do makeup to make her look older? And then, so it was, so that's, when I saw the performance, it alleviated all my feelings.
It was funny how he almost, Manhattan is talking about her the same way that he does Janie Slater in earlier years at this point. But I don't think it's that simple. I think there is a sadness to him that was an interesting little twist here. I thought the actor who played Dr. Manhattan did an absolutely wonderful job of showing us that this man is disconnected, and that but is always present there. Yeah. There's something a little bit more that you can almost see it. You can almost grasp it. And he skirted that line really well, which I thought was a strength, because you run a danger of going too far with us, and you're like, well, no, he was showing emotion nonstop all the way through. It was subtle, very faint. You had to really look at it. So it was very brilliantly portrayed. To me, it added to me a greater understanding of what really was going on internally with this guy. That, yes, it was true, he was completely disconnected, but there is a sadness to him because he doesn't understand how to connect. And there's that part of it. Like, he's too smart, he's gone too far. And I think this happens with people who start to achieve that level of intelligence. You start to have trouble bringing yourself down. And I don't mean in the sense like dumbing yourself down. I mean more so being in touch with it. You're so gifted in one area that you start to lose your strength in other areas. In many ways, he's as socially inept as Rorschach is.
Yeah.
Which is an interesting little conundrum. Humanity seems to hold no interest to him. New scientific discoveries are the priority to him because he sees it as challenging his mind. It's funny because I think really connecting with someone and appreciating their individuality and differences when they can often be very extreme. And the unique nature of humans due to random nature of breeding is something that becomes an interesting point later where he realizes, like, wait a minute, I had this in front of me all along, and now that I finally get it, I see them for what they are. So it's interesting to see that in the beginning, that distinction that he's saying humans no longer hold interest for me, but there is that moment later where it sparks to him that, oh my gosh, I had something far more interesting in front of me all along. He's lost touch with being able to see that when just having Rorschach and Laurie in the room together, that should have shown him that. The distinction between those two, talk about two completely different animals. Malin Ackerman, very pretty girl, as we said, when she dresses up for the date with Dan, she looks like somebody a guy would fall for. The chemistry of this moment was great. It does a great job of establishing why Dan would want to be with her. When she finds that in Dan, there's something there that she was missing with John, you easily find yourself rooting for him.
you see the moment where he's struck with the thunderbolt, man. He's just like that. Whoa.
She dresses up really nice. I mean, it was really nice. I liked the elegance of her versus kind of the common man nature of Dan Dryberg. It was kind of interesting that she was of a little bit of a different caliber.
She technically is out of his league.
Yeah, way out.
It's every, geek's dream. Like, yeah, see, it can happen.
But because of the fact that she knows Night Owl, she sees the man for what he really is. She sees the man for who he can be and finds a common thread in the two of them that they're both trying to find their place in life right now. He, in the sense that he gave up this something that he can't quite admit to himself that's his problem. That he's missing that.
Yeah.
And, in her, in the case that she can't quite put her finger on, she's missing that connection to people, that thrill, that excitement, the feeling of being alive when she's been with someone who's really so cold at this point, like a battery.
Yeah.
Why isn't Nina's 99 Luftballons in more films?
That was an odd choice, but it worked.
Oh,
once again, totally, just the musical, it just worked.
I bought the soundtrack, so well, that's why I was able to pull up Bob Dylan before.
I just thought you had Dylan.
No, I bought the soundtrack. I do have Dylan, actually, but I bought the soundtrack, so it was kind of Captain Carnage's story with the Rorschach elevator shaft ending.
Okay.
It's great.
Every single time we saw that, the audience laughed at that moment.
Oh, yeah.
When I first saw it without you, I was like, yeah, and I was cheering right along because I knew it was coming, and there was obviously, I had people around me who didn't know the work, so they were, that was a fun, just perfect moment.
Because we've all been there where it's two old friends connecting, and it again shows quickly a familiarity. They started off with this awkward moment where both are nervous, and then those stories connected them and the fondness, and you could see that growing all the way through. The awkward, half-hearted, it was awful from Dan. When Laurie was talking about her tight latex costume was a riot. Him saying, oh, honey, you can wear that all the time. But it's that awkward age we all go through. It's funny. Yeah, Dan was planning to have this great evening with her and maybe make some moves until she talks about her studly blue boyfriend who is predicting nuclear war is coming. I so felt for my boy Dan there. What do you expect when the comedian is dead? Indeed. The joke's over. It was funny. You could see, though, at that moment that, like, he was connecting with her. They were laughing over Rorschach. She brings up this moment. You see his face drop.
There's so many of those moments. There's so many of those moments when you just feel bad for the guy because we've all been in that type of boat where, you're thinking, I'm making some headway. And then she brings up the boyfriend.
It does establish him as a nice guy, though, when he encourages her by reminding her that John's pretending means that he cares. When she was talking about, is he pretending and all that type of thing. Yeah, that means he cares. He's thinking about you. It's amazing with the cuts they had to make that they really did establish all of these characters in a way that is very true to the 12-issue epic. So they had to cut things down to keep this film a certain length, but they did a good job. The cemetery sequence with Simon and Garfunkel, another solid musical choice. I was glad that they kept in a version of Laurie and Sally's confrontation during Blake's funeral, because I think that is a pivotal sequence of events. Teleporting sure does look a lot cooler on Star Trek and shows like Tomorrow People, where you don't get the view of your lunch afterwards. The Tijuana Bible showing the original Silk Spectre. It's funny, my wife saw the Dr. Norge Tijuana Bible and puked like Laurie did when teleporting.
You didn't have to go there, man.
I didn't, no.
You didn't have to do that.
Poor Eddie. Let's talk about poor Eddie.
Especially because I had the Sensei What Night Do You Want a Bible joke. I wanted to tell him.
Great minds.
I'm like, damn it, man.
Sad state of affairs that we both just like to destroy each other. Things changed 40 years ago, and this does ring true. The rape sequence plays out close to the comic. It was brutal and didn't glorify the act, which was important, as it should never be taken lightly. The bits with the bits with hooded justice and his sexuality were lost unless you read the original work. But I did like that they still had that moment with Blake in there where he was hinting at it. But you never get to read Hollis Mason's work, so you don't see that, wait, there is some truth there.
It was funny. I saw an interview with the actor who's playing, comedian, and they asked him point blank about the rape sequence, and he said that was a very uncomfortable scene for him to do. But it was such a powerful, scene that he had to do it, and he had to put his whole heart into it. But it was a tough scene to do, and that was another one of those. I was glad
it was in no way a sexy scene.
Oh God, no! But it was one of those in the audience. I heard a couple whoa kind of sounds.
Good.
And especially that first when she first punches him with the no bam, and he just comes back with that gut shot. That was just like whoa, wow, and it was like your watch is like you were watching a real rape go on. It was a very powerful scene.
In many ways, it was just as powerful as the original killing of Blake.
Yeah,
with the punches being thrown.
I would put it as a little bit more powerful. More. I meant in the sense,
but no, the punches being thrown. I'm not saying I agree with you in the sense that it was a much more grim and horrible sequence. I meant, we saw a hero and a quote-unquote villain going head-to-head in the beginning of the film, tearing each other to shreds. The same amount of violence I'm talking about with the punching and kicking was going on there as when Blake was being thrown around his apartment.
Yeah.
So I guess that's where it was like, and you've got it between a man and a woman, and I was glad it didn't glorify that in any way.
Yeah.
And it didn't. There was nothing sexy about it. They didn't go over the top compared to how it was in the comic. Like she wasn't topless or anything like that. It wasn't needed for that sequence. It needed to be graphic and nothing sexy about it. And I liked that. The choice of how that was filmed, it was a touchy subject, and I thought that they handled it well in the sense that you're angry at him, and you should be.
Yeah.
And it worked. So I thought it was an interesting sequence to talk about. Gotta love the Vietnam bits. It sets up why the world would even be scared of John, and how nuclear development would continue to accelerate. Even with unlimited energy, fear of John would continue to keep weapons development in place. Eddie didn't need to be there, really, when you think about it. John could have ended it all. But he needed to be in the middle of the action anyway. He's a realist about everything that is wrong with the world. He's all about Eddie, yet deep down there's a sadness to him. He sees the world for the corruption that it's filled with and realizes there's nothing he can do to change it. He's not that guy. I wonder if that sense of inadequacy is part of what drives him to be such a pompous, selfish man on the outside, versus what we see on him on the inside. I don't know.
Yeah, he's a character.
There's more to him.
Yeah, there's so much more to the comedian that they really couldn't delve too deeply in the movie. It was one of the characters that, they developed the character and they showed him, but they really didn't get too far into his psyche, what makes him tick. We can see it because we've read all the works and all that. But, just for someone who's watching a movie, because that was something my sister commented on with him. She's like, there's got to be more to him in the comic. She knew there was more to the character. Laurie's remembrance of a certain sequence with her dad, we'll talk about when we get to that sequence of events, but there was a dialogue piece that was left out there that shows a vulnerability to him that makes more sense of the picture being in the apartment. I think the picture being in the apartment is a critical point where we see that there is a softer side to him. He has 2 pictures of Silk Spectre in there. You don't see a picture of the girl from Vietnam. It just shows there is more to this man than this horrible person that you see on the outside. And I agree. I don't think that was established. The bits where he kills the woman carrying his child, though, shows how far he's gone. He no longer has any respect for humanity. Again, back to one of the focus points. People are disconnected from each other. Everyone out for themselves. There's that whole... He's kind of a weird joke on society as well, which, if he's the image of what society really is, it makes Veidt's point, which is an interesting little twist in this whole thing as this storyline goes on. And I'm not saying, I don't think that's one of the great things about Watchmen is nothing that simple, because then you can argue and debate where Rorschach's right and Dan's right and John's right. And there's certain elements of all of them that you can pull in, and I like the fact that there is no one set answer to
the message of everything in this movie. And I like that. You can watch it differently every time depending on which characters you're focused on and what perspective you're sitting and looking at the film from. That's where it becomes a complex and an endearing work. You can read it over and over and over again, and you're never going to read it the same way twice, because it's going to make you think of a different way. I think for me, what really struck me with watching the film this time and rereading it this time was this sense of ambivalence, this sense of selfishness of society, and the fact that people are out for themselves and what a negative effect that has, and nobody's looking out for any or helping their fellow man and that type of thing. It's really interesting how that twist is, and what would it take to shock people into banding together and thinking more of others. That was more what I got out of this, and I really liked that aspect of this. His argument with John was very valid. How do you watch that and not act? Could you watch somebody, if you had the power to zap the gun into something else? Super Flowers, for example.
Yeah. That's, and even if you look at it, that's just an innocent woman who's pregnant with a child and not do something. That is just like, we talk about, like, would you act or would you panic? Would you freeze? I could see like a normal person going, oh, you can't do that. And, then, just freeze up. But this isn't a normal person. He could have just with a thought, and he knew it was coming because he sees the future at the same time. So he could have stopped it. You're showing the disconnect of him, his separation of his humanity. And I love the fact that Eddie's just like, God help us all, because he sees it coming down the pipeline. Once he's completely separated from humanity, what will he do?
Veidt started out leading the Watchmen, which works, but I preferred the moments with Captain Metropolis that seemed to drive the inner thinking of Ozymandias. If you're in the original comic, when that whole sequence was going on and he was kind of pleading with everyone, Ozymandias, that seemed to be having the inner dialogue, and you got to see the look on his face and from his responses to that he was listening, and that was kind of what shocked him into action at that point. So I will say that's another sequence of events where I'm like, I would have preferred Captain Metropolis more of a role in the film, because I think it showed a lot more what drove. But again, maybe that was too early for the reveal, and that was part of the reason why they chose to move it away, which, again, like the Dan Dryberg sequence, that was the reason for the change.
And I also think that...
I think they were setting up more of the mystery in the film.
Right, and I also think that they didn't want to introduce or have too many characters interacting. They didn't want to have another character in there that wouldn't make it through to the end. And then they'd have to explain how he disappears or, go through all that. So,
but I do think that it's funny. I think I'm kind of answering my own question, because when I was originally doing my notes, I was kind of posing this for a discussion point. But I'm kind of thinking to myself, I'm like, well, okay. More when we were talking about the Dan Dryberg sequence, I think this keeps the mystery a little longer of who the real villain is. And I think that was the reason for the choice, was to kind of keep Veidt a secret in a way that I think you needed to do in this case. Still a great scene, because the comedian lays the groundwork that the world is a powder keg due to weapons that could blow us up many times over. But is he also talking about the state of the human condition? What events would it take to dramatically change that concept? It's interesting how he's establishing that. I ain't had this much fun since Woodward and Bernstein, when the two of them are on there.
Oh,
now,
man. I
want to talk about this for a second, because the video game actually fleshes out Woodward and Bernstein and some of the 70s stuff they talk about earlier. There's a downloadable Watchmen video game that's on the PlayStation 3 and the Xbox 360. And I got to be honest with you, when I first heard about this, I'm like, I'm going to download it because it's Watchmen, but I didn't expect much because it's a downloadable game. So I'm like, I think it's going to be entertaining, but, it's usually those things are fluff. You play as Rorschach or Night Owl. It takes place in the early 70s, featuring Underboss, which is mentioned in the movie. This is the mission where you get to see that take place, their capture of Underboss, and a plot against Woodward and Bernstein that explains why this world would be different than ours, because Woodward and Bernstein were the ones that actually exposed Nixon. So it's an action game a la the classic 2D side-scrollers such as Final Fight. If anybody remembers that Capcom game, 3 players, you could kind of, go around and do side scroll. It's a beat 'em up, but this is in full 3D. But it's the same style of gameplay. There's 6 chapters, each featuring different locations and enemies, and they're set up like Watchmen chapters. Chapter 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, like you used to in the comic. There's unlockable combos. It can be repetitions, which is normal for this genre, but each chapter has different characters, and the unlockable combos and the solid story make it worth playing. So it is something for comic fans if you want to see more of the story. It's fun to play. I mean, it was fun to play as the characters. I haven't had a chance to play together yet to see what it's like for 2 players. But the solo mission I played through as Rorschach. Had a blast unlocking the combos. It looks like if you play as Night Owl, because of the different types of operating ways that they do things, there's little side parts where it'll branch off, and you get to see the two help each other during the mission.
Cool.
So you see them see them really team up to do that. They go into the jail, they go into alleys, they go into all. It makes sense. It's this big overarching story. There's cutscenes in between and throughout that are told a la comic book style, kind of like the motion comic, that are set in the 70s that kind of expand. So it's an expanded story. Like I said, the only criticism I would give to the thing, like any of these games for anybody who played Final Fight and stuff like that, it's repetitious in the sense that you're really running around beating people up, which can be a whole lot of fun with combos and stuff. It is challenging. It's a challenging game. I had a lot of fun playing it. There's some sequences where I'm like, it wasn't very heroic, but the action got too heavy, so I left Dan on his own as I was running away, so that way I could pick off a few people as they came after me, so I lived. So I'm like sitting there, I'm like, this really isn't what Rorschach would do. But then you get this rage meter and you power up, and then I went in and I'm wasting everybody. It is definitely violent in the sense that he's killing people left and right. It's a fun game. It is, so I would recommend it. It definitely does. For anybody who's a fan of Watchmen and wants the expanded story, it's there. The only slight criticism I have would be that it is a little repetitious. But and it's not super long. It's 6 chapters, which in gameplay terms, it's going to give you a good few hours of gameplay. It's fun, and there's a reason to play it again, to play as Night Owl, and I'm sure with a friend it'd be a blast.
Yeah, we got to try that.
Yeah, so I mean, we got to do that. So I just thought it'd be kind of a fun thing just to talk about at this point because of the Woodward and Bernstein mention, because it is...
Yeah, I do like when they, modify history, and especially, that was something I liked about the original comic that I really like in the movie, seeing that, and...
I was glad the game took the tack, though, of instead of redoing the story yet again, they went and they told a side story that hasn't been told.
Yeah.
Which was a really good move, because at this point, at the same time, people are picking up the comic. I reread the comic. I watched the motion comic. I've seen the film. I don't really need this story yet again. I wanted something different, and this gave me that. So I liked about it.
Now, I wonder when they came up with the idea and the concept, if they talked to any of the creators of Watchmen and got their input.
Well, there's one we know they didn't talk to.
Yeah.
I guess maybe Dave Gibbons, but... Imagine fighting crime like Night Owl, with the most noble intentions to better the world, to be spit at and turned on by the people you tried to help. Whatever happened to the American dream? You're looking at it as Blake takes out the last guy standing. Now, how did you take that, then? What do you think Blake meant?
That, there's so many variations on that. I can think that all of them, the American dream, it's dead. It's not, look for the positive and the good. It's, look at the darkness of people. Look for the worst and then, react. It's the take, give me. Let me take this while I can.
Let me go as far as I possibly can.
Right.
But there's, a lot of love for the fellow man.
Yeah, it's not ask not what your country can do for you, but what can your country do, what can your country do for me kind of mentality. It's, that darker side of, what people think is the American dream.
Each of the 3 remembers Blake, and it's funny how the segments with him make them question themselves. Do you think this in many ways drives them to be the people we see them become later in the film, or to drive them to the place they are currently at? It's interesting. It was just an interesting little discussion point as they were going on.
That's actually something with Night Owl. You really, in the movie, they did a really wonderful job just showing the resurrection of the hero in him. And this funeral sequence was a huge part of that rebirth and that return of the dun-dun-dun.
There comes a point in our life where we all need to find that thing that makes us feel alive again, that makes us feel like we're worth something again. It drives us to be better people. In many ways, that is how we do something for society. There's nothing worse in any job, in any life, than to become ambivalent and just kind of let things happen around you. Kind of go through the motions and never really affect anything. You're not positive to your friends, family, yourself. It just kind of you become very blah. It affects your health, it affects your person. If you take a look at him, how he is in most of the film, and then what he looks like towards the end of the film. How there seems to be a different look to him,
There's a different strut. He's got the strut.
He's got a different. He cares about his appearance more. There's something more about him where life matters to him again. It's interesting how that twist happens, and it just kind of goes to show how it's really important that we all. It's another message in this film. I think that was cool. Blake clearly is an influence on where Veidt is headed, and on a small level, what Laurie is able to accomplish with John could be considered partially influenced by this scene with Blake. Dan, it seems, was overwhelmed and disheartened. He lost sight of the reasons why he originally donned the mask. In many ways, I think Rorschach is good for him. He understands Rorschach. While he doesn't entirely agree with his methods, he agrees with some of the man's ideology. He's just not as extreme. Laurie will be the catalyst that will give him the confidence so that he can be that agent of change again, that person, that adventurer, masked adventurer that they talk about again. And we all need that adventure in our life. That's something that gives us that excitement. It would be hard to get motivated in this world without it. Matt Frewer from Max Headroom and Star Trek as Moloch. What did you think about him, man? Another perfect casting decision.
Yeah, that was a great casting.
I do wish we could have seen Rorschach jump out of the fridge. I realized there wasn't enough time for multiple visits, but this one was great.
Yeah.
The turnaround, and it was great. The Blake flashback is filled with regret and reality over the events they are about to happen. He knew what Veidt was planning for John and for the world. Do the ends justify the means? Do you think he feels partially responsible on some level for not stopping it? Because he was powerless to stop it? What was going on here? Do you think he was ready to take steps to do something at this point? Or
No, he was. What we're seeing is just the broken man. Just he's not the. He
knows what's coming.
Yeah, he knows what's coming, and in a way, I saw him just part of the reason why he said and knew it was about time. When the actual fight actually happened, he knew he was going to die. He knew it was his time. He had to pay for his sins. There's so many nasty things he has done in life that this was a fitting punishment for him.
Well, I do like the concept, though, that he was able to rationalize in his own mind. He's done horrible things to women, but never anything on this level.
Yeah.
So he's able to rationalize that and it made him see what a terrible person he had become. It's kind of like you're faced with Armageddon, and we all say, I need more minutes for redemption. I need more time to, what would I do differently now if I had another day, another week, another month? What would I do? He doesn't have that time. He knows the clock is ticking. The doomsday clock, in many ways, is affecting him. So it was interesting to see that at that point. Illegal medication, about to die from cancer. Moloch wants to live. The list thing, Blake would know just how many people were murdered to set up John. Humans are savage in nature, and Blake chose to be a parody of it. I give the filmmaker credits for including elements like the joke that Rorschach told about the depressed and lonely clown.
Oh, man,
But,
yeah.
Doctor, I am Pagliacci. Roll on the snare drum. Curtains as the screen goes black. I can almost feel myself turning the page at the end of that particular issue. I really liked that.
That was just a really cool moment.
Yeah, it was. It really was. It brought that to life. Now, I have to be honest. Sure, having way too many hands work you over sounds great on paper, but having them be clones of the exact same person, the creep factor of this is actually enhanced on film, where we see the multiple copies of John in the flesh. Your fingers are like licking a battery. Now, I got smacked by my wife when I used that line. It's kind of, what? Okay. What not? No, hold on. I got a rant here. Okay. Then you can go. I know you've got somewhere to go, and trust me, you can go. I will quietly let you go there. But okay, what not to do if you can clone yourself and you want a successful evening with your wife? Tip number 1. John almost got away with being in the doghouse until she found out he was in the man cave. Okay, he truly is a relationship dolt. Everyone knows that when you're spending time with a pretty girl, you don't keep half of yourself in the man cave. All right? Tip number 2. Now, While I respect that he repaired the man cave toys after she threw things at them, you should also wait to do that until after you've had a chance to calm the situation down. I know John wanted the TV repaired to watch old episodes of Matlock, After MASH, and a bit of SpongeBob the Irradiated Builder, but he really needed to patch things up with Lori first. Then you go to Best Buy and you pick up the new flat screen. Everyone knows this. It's guy code. We are impatient people, but still you hold it together long enough for that to work. Tip number 3. Never say you are prepared to discuss anything when you did something boneheaded. It comes off as snarky. Even if you truly don't realize what you did was wrong, just say you're sorry. Trust me, she knows exactly what you did wrong. She will tell you and more than likely grab the rolling pin. Her idea of discussing it is quite different than yours. Just accept the blame. It's safer even when you are a blueberry-eating, over-endowed Smurf-like fella. All right? Tip number 4. When a woman says, "What am I to you?" you answer everything. You don't choose that moment to teleport a reactor to Karnak. I know how exciting and tempting that sounds, but let's be honest. The people waiting for a reactor might seem impatient, but where else are they going to find a big blue dude to send them a reactor? If you send it to them in the morning, you're still going to beat FedEx. You got to take care of the woman at that point in time, all right? Tip number 5. Don't tell a girl she's your only remaining link to the world when you screwed up steps 1 to 4. You make it sound like she's a burden, and you sound like a dork. Side note, it's also poor form to have that conversation publicly when the reactor doofus is listening in. Tip number 6. If all else fails, make sure there are no less than 4 clones of you standing there naked to remind her that the comic book version of you is not to scale. Rest assured, she will tell her friends otherwise, and you need proof from the reactor dudes that are watching the whole sequence of events. So that's just kind of my little rant on the whole thing. Oh. Tips for Dr. Manhattan from Dr. Norge. One doctor to the other.
You know what? You got me beat on any. Only comment I was going to make was just how I found it very interesting when we were watching that someone in the audience said, "Well, he's got 4 arms. Does he have 4 penises?" Really loud so that the entire movie theater can hear.
Yeah.
I thought that was a very funny thing.
Who in their right mind does science experiments in the nude? I mean, there's all kinds of machinery involved. And with that thing waving around like a pendulum on Big Ben, I see an accident with a conveyor belt, an open flame, a beaker of acid, or perhaps a table saw. We already know from the fact that he looks like a reject from the Blue Man Group that our boy John is accident prone. You would think that dude would wear a hazmat suit after he previously split into microscopic nothingness. Instead, hey, let's be less safe. It's kind of like, all kidding aside. Go ahead.
I was going to say, how does he get through OSHA, man? Come on. Safe environment there, right there. He doesn't have steel-toed shoes on. No. He doesn't have a hard hat.
No.
He doesn't have pants.
Yeah, well.
Come on.
Honestly, this was a great interpretation of the comic, all kidding aside. It was great to see further development of this relationship with Veidt, who was planning on so many levels for how to deal with John later and hiding in plain sight. It was further proof that this guy, hey, I got something in place. There's nobody that's going to be able to counter what I'm doing. Nice tiny detail showing us the picture of John and Janie from the original comic. I was glad to see elements from cutscenes incorporated into other areas of the film to bring as many true to the comic moments as possible. It does show that he cares deep down, even if he doesn't realize and understand that is what's truly happening with him. Lori and Dan played out very well when she comes to him to vent. Leaving someone is very hard when you have lived with them for so long. You need that support piece. I think in her case, she is also looking for human contact, when for so long she has been with someone who is disconnected from humanity. I think it does establish that Dan is a genuine and likable guy. John is preparing for the show, the interview that he's going to be on. And it's an amazing use of special effects. I do adore the character. I think he adds such an interesting dynamic to the story. I think when you see someone so disconnected, you naturally find a way that this guy could connect with the world around him. And I think it makes you a stronger person when you do that, because it has to influence you to make sure you don't wind up like him. So I think that's an interesting little side thing from this story, that you tell people things that you probably didn't know before and that type of thing. It's an interesting little twist. I did enjoy the pigment change for the TV and the comics and how it worked out here. Imagine being a partner with someone like Rorschach for years, but never really knowing who he was or what he looked like. Dan walks right past Kovacs, repeatedly. It's like, where's Rorschach now? And I love those moments. It's really great. John's interview takes the unexpected twist he set up. Imagine wanting something so bad that you feel like giving many others cancer is the right thing to do. How could Veidt do that? I mean, could you imagine having that plan for years and hatching it and gradually giving people cancer?
Yeah, and it's so, going through his argument, what he did it for, killed millions to save billions, and just, I couldn't do it. There's no way I could live with myself, just, the destruction that he caused. And I really, really like the fact that reporter just came across even more sleazy in the movie than he did in the comic book, where he just kept the assault going, and he was going for that that anger moment. He was going for the rage and the wrath that is Dr. Manhattan. It's like, and what about this, and what about this, and this, cancer, and he was just hammering it and hammering it, and it was just that that sleazy tabloid journalism pit bull that it just attacks and keeps going. I ate that up. And I remember reading it, when I read it, I wanted to kill the dude. And in the movie, I just wanted to just jack him one in the face saying, dude, back off.
I like the clock analogy from the countdown to Armageddon. It also brought in a little of his past that we don't see on camera. We get to see that his dad's a watchmaker and all that type of thing. And we do eventually get to see a little bit of that in flashbacks, but it was interesting to see how that developed in the comic book, where we got to see this man, basically because of Dad, it drove his whole education, his whole experience, and what he wanted to do in life. The fight in the alley with Laurie and Dan versus the thugs showed another favorite bit of this film for me. The action just stays very cool throughout the film. I really liked the fact that they needed each other. They relied on each other. There were moments where one stepped in for the other to make sure they were, safe. And it was really, really intense. It feels straight out of a comic. It was over the top, but never too far to the point where you're like, oh, come on. Yeah. And it was an interesting balance there, because it was extreme. It was definitely comic-y in the sense that you knew that it was over the top, but I give them credit because they didn't take it too far to the point where you ever groaned. At least I didn't. Did you ever feel
No. It's like, the Charlie's Angels movies, there was stuff that they did that defied physics, and there's no way they could have done it. Whereas in Watchmen, a person could have done all that. They would have had to have been well-trained, knew exactly what they were doing, and up against an undisciplined fighter, which is what they were up against. They were up against thugs and bullies. The thugs and bullies aren't your disciplined fighters. They rely on the pack mentality, and the pack mentality wins fights by numbers and by fear. Well, they were going up against two people who had no fear in them. They knew, I'm a better fighter than you, I can take you. And then once you get over that fear, you start injecting the fear back into the pack. Once the pack loses their strength, you take them down. And you saw it early in the beginning of the fight. There was the bone breaking and just the seriously messing them up. They reach for the weapons. They're pulling out.
I felt some of those punches and slams.
Oh, yeah. And it was just classic just fight training. And I love that. Throughout all the fight sequences in this movie, their fight coordinator should just, be applauded, because it was just so well done, and just, the choreograph and just the cinematography of the fight sequences were just outstanding.
Dude, I want a handler. Because, boy, does that turn have a broad range. Anything from wrestlers like Kamala, the Ugandan giant, to monsters like King Kong. And now Dr. Manhattan has a handler. I asked my wife, she won't let me tell people she's my handler. It'd be great just to walk around, hey, this is my handler. It's like, I think the day and age of the posse is coming to an end, and we're going to see the handler be the new thing. With the economy so in the tank, people can't afford an entourage anymore. A handler is like a dollar store version of a posse. It just shows status.
Okay.
Janie Slater is the final cancer victim announced, and when she shows up on the scene, I started to feel for John. You see him pleading that he doesn't know, that he didn't know what was going on, trying to get through to her that nobody told me. The pulling off the wig was really a brilliant idea. It was something a little bit of a variation on the whole thing. It added to the reason for the mob's rally around John. It was like the last straw. Anger and rage. I do like that we see human emotion here that he often forgets that he has. It was assigned to us that he could be reached. That it isn't as simple as he's disconnected. There is that part of him where there is emotion inside him. Veidt later talks about that he knew it was there. This is what Veidt was going for. He was attacking certain human emotions that John no longer knows how to deal with. He's like a child in many ways in dealing with his emotions. He has to be retaught what those emotions are, and Veidt attacks that like a pit bull, and it worked here. He goes straight to Mars, and we see the photograph again, and I'm glad that we got this glimpse into happier times with Janie. I think these were pivotal development points. I think the Mars sequence is critical. We need to have sympathy for John, and this is where we get it. We connect with him, the man who was. Slight changes to John's history. It's too bad that he went back for his own watch in the film. I liked that the timepiece was fixed as a way to show off a skill and a hobby that he loved to Janie in the comic. I think we all like to do that if we have a skill. There's that part. And that excitement that was in the comic book. I mean, again, this is these little tiny things I'm talking about that were variations. When I talk about them, it's not, I loved the film, beginning to end. I think it was a great film. There were just some things when I was really thinking about, I'm like, geez, I really wish this could have been developed more and they could have done this. And they didn't. They weren't able to. It's just, it's kind of they made sacrifices that they needed to make. Note to self. Don't leave accessories or garments inside intrinsic field generators. Use a coat rack or perhaps a nice closet.
Yeah, that's what your locker in the locker room is for. You know, come on.
You don't keep your gloves in the blender.
No.
It's these are just things you don't do. But yet, this guy just doesn't, my shoes don't stay in the oven. It's it's just kind of there's places where things are meant to be. What did you think of Janie leaving him in the comic and the original story when he was about to die and in the film? I mean, she leaves him, can't be there. I had a huge issue with her character because of this, that she would do this. I think it's brilliant. I think it's a wonderful moment. It shows the humanity of her. It shows her intrinsic flaw. In many ways, it makes me want to smack her upside the head and makes me more sympathetic towards him, that I'm like, woman just ditched out on him. Very hard to stay there. I get that. But those are his moments where he needed any kind of comfort in his last dying moments. It'd be like leaving a cancer victim.
Yeah.
He's dying. It's hard. I understand. Harder on her at that moment. But you've got to be there to comfort the person. This is someone she loves, right?
Yeah. And
where was she? She sacrificed so much. At that moment, though, it showed me a major flaw in her character. That was something that I think added more strength to Laurie for me than her, because I think if it had been Laurie there, Laurie wouldn't have left.
No.
Silk Spectre? She would have stayed.
Yeah. She would have stayed.
I'm talking about strength of character here, dude. It does take a strength of character when somebody's going through something horrible and they need you to be there for that moment. There was no physical harm for her for being there. There was emotional. But that was the person that she loved, and you have to put yourself ahead of that person. Interesting distinction on how our society is people who aren't thinking of others first. They're thinking of themselves. She, at that pivotal moment, left him.
Yeah. She should have done the, you hold up the hand to the glass.
Yeah, then go through years of therapy.
Right. Yeah.
And I'm not belittling that moment. That would have been a horrible thing to witness, and it would have been terrible. But
I don't know if I would have had the guts.
I didn't have as much. It was funny, at that moment, it took away a lot of my sympathy for her to see her just up and leave him at that moment.
See, I don't know.
Wait, who's it going to be worse on? Her having to witness it or him having to live through it? The dude was split into tiny pieces. That can't have been comfortable.
Well, it can't have been comfortable, but, in the end, though, in your mindset, you rationalize that in the end, he's done. He's dead. He's no more pain and suffering. Who knew he'd be able to come back? She has to deal with the suffering. She has to deal with the mourning and the loss. Now, for me, I would feel worse about myself had I left. And I think if the situation was reversed, if I was her and that was my significant other in there, I probably would have left, just because I don't think I have the strength of character to watch them suffer and die. But I would have
What
felt...
if there was popcorn?
Maybe. No. No, seriously,
I'm just saying.
Yeah, maybe. Popcorn.
Everything's a little easier to deal with.
Everything's a little...
snack.
Munch on some corn,
Because it takes your mind off of the other things.
Right, exactly.
Yeah.
But afterwards, though, I would have felt like, complete and total garbage that I left
realistically, you should.
Yeah, so who knows what pain she was going through afterwards.
Right.
So...
I like that history runs out of order, that we don't see things chronologically. We see things kind of jumping back and forth in his own memory as he clicks back to happier times, their first meeting, the hands touching on the glass, that type of stuff. We see Dad as the watchmaker with John. So why not have her watch be the one he went after? I guess I don't know why that sequence carried a lot more weight to me with him going back for her watch. It just seemed to me like... You would make it added some sense of drama to the fact that he did this because he was trying to do something nice for her, and I liked that about him. I guess it made him more sympathetic of a character. Minor, tiny thing, and just a little nitpick, but it's just a sequence that I particularly liked.
Dude, let it go.
Yeah, great special effects on his reconstruction when he was restructuring his body. Yeah. They are shaping me into something gaudy, something lethal. When he's talking about those sequences with the government talking about him. I'm glad to see that John would find discomfort in such a view of himself. He even questions Nixon asking him to intervene in Vietnam. I gotta be honest. Who wouldn't bow down to a guy blowing people's heads off with the wave of a finger? I think that's why we often see fear in stories of superpowered heroes. It works on so many levels. Hollis Mason called John the dawn of the superhero. As he blows up some crooks, I don't see that as heroic, which is why I think John has confusion as well. He stopped them, but realistically, he was never motivated to be a hero. This wasn't about arresting them or putting them into jail. He was a scientist caught in an accident. A hero would have naturally thought of a way to contain versus splatter everyone all over, and, you're taking home a chunk of somebody in your coffee cup.
Well, it's the wave of the hand. You turn the gun into air, and poof, they got these guns, and they're just gone.
Right. So just a different distinction between that. I liked that. Superman exists and he is American. The man changes this later to God exists and he's American. And I'm glad to see that there's the distinction where we clearly see that this man kind of reworked this for his own way to get notice on television. It's kind of a way to make himself relevant again. I am glad they went through the difficulty of immortality. Janie ages, but John doesn't. Did Lori wind up that way? Is that why their relationship changed? Or is there something more there, with his disconnect? Interesting military situation. John is gone. Soviets are on the move. Would you take a 54% chance of wiping out the enemy before he can make that move? 54% chance. That's not good odds.
It's better than 0%, though.
But we'll lose all of the East Coast.
Yeah.
Fallout drift to Mexico and the farm areas. How is any of that acceptable? Would you go to DEFCON 2? And it's an interesting... I'm not saying a negative comment. I'm glad they showed this because it shows, in many ways, it's another argument for Weitz. That's what I like about the morality of this film. Mm-hmm. Even though I'm adamantly against what Weitz did, you can't help but listen to the argument.
And understand why he did it.
Yeah. I mean, that's the rich part of this story. It's very well developed that you can really not just fight anybody in this story. Weitz's plan is in play. They are trying to blackmail him into being labeled a communist to stop him from putting them out of business. I like seeing Lee Iacocca and people like that.
Lee.
Yeah. It's sad because I do think money often drives how slow we progress as a society. Computers. Why are computer chips coming out every year with new, faster models? Well, because realistically they're holding back those chips so that way they can put out new ones every year and keep that economy going. It's interesting that his theory is that wars are often fought over fossil fuels. So if you give everybody more than they will ever need of a new resource, the conflict should end. Again, he's playing, and it's not his plan, it's not his real plan, but he's playing off of very real society concerns that are very timely today, very relevant today. We could be just as sucker today with this.
Oh, big time, easily.
As they try and dispute him, he reminds them that he can buy and sell all of them. Imagine knowing you are the head of or own a company that a man can buy you out of if needed. Again, another example of power breeding fear. It's not respect, it's fear.
Yeah. Well, it's the can money buy you happiness? What is money? Is it power? Is it motivation? Is it fear? There's all the big classic businesses. Look at what's currently going on in our environment right now with these big mega businesses failing and getting government handouts and whatnot. This right here, this guy is beyond that. He is above and beyond anyone controlling, manipulating him. He is the grand puppet master. He is the man with he's the man with the plan and the man with all the answers. And that was something that I really ate up, just seeing this start laying out. You start seeing a little bit of the sinister side to Veidt as he's dealing with these people. And they immediately start, hey, we got off on the wrong foot, man. Let's be buddies. Let's be pals. They immediately recognize, we can't intimidate this kid. There's nothing we can say to stop him or even slow him down. We better become his friends, and we better become his friends quickly.
The murder attempt was brilliant.
Yeah.
It was meant to make it look like he was a target. Oh my God, he killed Lee Iacocca. Again, another adaptation from the book that translated very well. Makes slight little changes to it. He takes him out, and we see him feed the man the capsule, making sure there's no way it can be traced back to him. It's just a wonderfully well played out sequence. Great acting, great action. The cinematography in this just, the choreography, fight choreography, just,
Yeah.
Dan and Laurie being watched by Rorschach. Great detective work. Consider the option that she might have made Manhattan leave to be with Drybird, but then he plays through the whole thing. And the development of Blake and Manhattan in regards to her made him consider her as a suspect in Blake's death as well. I missed that here, a little bit, because, we needed a little bit more development of that, but... Back at Moloch's, the symbol of the Pyramid Company leads him back, and this was a great setup with Moloch dead and the weapon in place. He looks guilty. The escape came right out of the comics page with the jump to the street and the fight for freedom, the burning of the officers, to losing his true face, give me back my face. It's just great, well-developed material. Veidt handled this brilliantly. It was awesome to see how defiant and uncompromising Kovacs could be in those moments.
Yeah, this just right out of the comic. This was just a beautiful adaptation in that fight sequence. I like seeing him scramble. No. And you just see the panic and just the gotta improvise, adapt, moving, keep going. And he's going through rummaging, finding up the matches, finding make his little handy dandy flamethrower, and just it was just a really cool, just scramble type moment that I really ate up.
Haley does a great job of showing us that this guy is just as intimidating outside of the mask. The criminals are shouting at him and trying to get into his head, but he is unfazed. His psychologist is another great casting sequence. I wish we could have seen more of the development of the psychologist's home life and how Rorschach got into his head. They Are Trapped in Here with Me has so much more meaning in the comic book, because we get to see the psychologist recognize that I'm trapped too. He's being drawn into the psychology that is Rorschach. It's, again, I understand the sacrifice and why it needed to be made. I'm glad that they kept in what they did. It was just, I would have been happy if this was a 6-hour movie. And so they did a great job of making choices to cut certain sequences. It's just you can't help but... I really wanted to take a look at what sequences from the book I wish...
Yeah.
It's like my ultimate wish list. If they could have done it, I would have liked to have seen. It wouldn't have been a mass market film, and that would have been...
there's that talk of releasing the director's cut in July, which I don't know if it's still on, because of...
I'm keeping my fingers crossed.
Yeah, hopefully.
This sequence made me geek out because Rorschach really was working the system at first. When he was sitting there showing him the pictures and the images that were leading to his own early memories, he was, playing the whole game there. And I think this is a good point right now. I think we'll kick off our part 2 of this discussion with the Rorschach interrogation and kind of go from there, because we're at a point right now where I think it's a good breaking point, because there's no way we're going to be able to finish this whole film.
No.
Right now, you and I are an hour and 50 minutes almost into our discussion, and I knew this one was going to be a heavy discussion. One thing before we do close out, I just wanted to touch on the motion comic for anyone out there, because I just figured people might be interested in, should I pick this up or not? I have it on Blu-ray and have it on my iPod. It's not full animation, but it's a clever use of making the character's background and costume elements move using the original art. The background music, that adds an interesting dramatic element to it, as well as the camera has an ability to zoom in and out and pan with dramatic effect. This type of thing, I don't want to replace the comics, because a lot of times when you're zooming in on art that is not as developed because it's meant to be background details, you get a close-up glimpse then of the fact that it's background art that isn't as developed because it's meant to stay in the background. So there's elements like that where you're just kind of like, well, that was really meant to stay back there. And that's not a knock on the art. It is a choice that you would make and you'd sacrifice in the sense that you're trying to get that comic book out. It's an element that people aren't supposed to be zooming in and focusing on. So there's elements like that where all of a sudden the camera zooms in for dramatic reasons on a character, but then that brings in background details that really shouldn't be in the front. I don't want this to replace comics. If we're going digital on some level, I would love for it to be in the traditional format, kind of like how ebooks are handled. E-comic books, where they downloaded iPods and things like that, and you kind of twist and turn. You still have the paper format, like regular novels and things like that. Motion comics, to me, are traditional comics like audiobooks are traditional novels. Both have a purpose and a place, and only enhance the chances of reaching a different audience. Yet, you can experience both and get something more. I mentioned I'm a fan of the Dark Tower series by Stephen King on the show multiple times. I have all the books, but I also have the Audible downloads that I run on my iPod. Now, I read the books. I would never have taken that away in a million years. There's something satisfying about reading a paper novel at your own pace, kind of absorbing that the same way we do comics and things like that. But this works on the same level in the sense that I love the original series. This motion comic treatment in no way, shape, or form, it's not to, my preference is the original graphic novel. And I do like that the motion comic in a classy way references, if you like this work, pick up the original graphic novel and read that. I do think your first preference for experiencing Watchmen should be the written work. But, if somebody who isn't interested in reading the comic and they want to sit down and watch a couple episodes of the motion comic, it's a great way to hook somebody into material that maybe before they would have never experienced. Maybe that'll drive them to pick up the book. If not, maybe it'll pick them up to experience it through the motion comics. And it offers a commonality where we can have a discussion now the way you do with audiobooks. I think comics are a material that genuinely would lend themselves to different medium, to different explorations. I'm all for different opportunities to experience these great stories, different opportunities to get creative work into other people's hands. If they aren't going to read it, let them listen to it and view it that way. And the motion comic isn't perfect. I think it's something that over time it's going to be developed and it's only going to get better and better. There were some flaws in it that, like I mentioned, where sometimes there's details that are being brought into the forefront that never should be brought into the forefront in a million years. There was that awkward sequence, like just for an example, in the stairwell where it just seems like, I'm like, that's clunky, the way that it goes. But I thought they did an admirable job. I was glad that I got it. I'm very satisfied with watching it. I will definitely watch it again at some point. I'm into this. I'm into this whole digital exploration with comics. I like the fact that you can get comics now on your iPod where you can just kind of turn the pages like you would, where it's panel by panel, kind of like what you can do with on the Kindle with like your books. So to me, I don't know. I guess I'm a big fan of it. I thought it would be a good point before we end this, just to talk about that and just say, this isn't for everybody, these motion comics. You can download this one episode at a time off of iTunes if you're interested in checking it out. If you're like, I'm not ready to make the commitment to buy the full DVD, go to iTunes, 99 cents I think it is. It might be a little bit more. I think it's 99 cents an episode. It might be wrong. It might be $1.49 or something. You can download one episode and see if it's for you. I will say, if you want to try the flip page comics and you have like an iPod Touch or an iPhone or something like that, a lot of them they're offered for free the first issue. You can kind of check some of those comics out there. It's kind of a neat way to just kind of explore a different approach to the medium. I don't want to see it. I love paper. I love paper comics. I love the smell of old comic books and things like that. I know I talk about digital and stuff. There's certain books that I won't pick up in paper because my budget won't afford them. But if you give me 4 or 5 books that I'm not currently buying and they're available on the iPod Touch at a major discount, there are books right now that due to time and money I won't pick up, that having them on my iPod to be able to leisurely page through when I'm sitting somewhere, I'm going to probably pick up subscriptions to a couple more titles that I wouldn't normally get through that method as a new way. And I think there's new readers that don't pick up comics now that would be into having that. So I think it's something that comic book companies should look at more and more, different methods of reaching out to a different audience. I think there's a unique audience out there that can't be. So it's kind of fun. This Watchmen discussion, dude.
2 hours on the first half of the movie.
Yeah, which I knew it was going to be the case, because once I started delving into notes, I'm like, I started noticing myself that I preferred certain sequences of events from the film versus the comic, and I thought we would be doing a disservice if we didn't talk about it. Plus, it doesn't really fit our show to kind of gloss over anything.
Yeah, we can't do anything light.
Hope you guys are enjoying this, though. We will be back next week with part 2 of this discussion.
Hey guys, it's Logan calling from Regina, Saskatchewan. Just calling to, I guess, ask your advice on a question that I have here. First off, I guess my question to you today revolves around, the fanboys and fangirls like myself that listen to your guys' cast every week. You've been kind enough to add me on as Facebook friends. And with convention season, underway, there's a good chance that many of us out there are going to bump into you guys on the convention floor or at your booth, or, there's a chance we might run into you at the bar or something. I can't speak for all fans, but I really enjoyed meeting and talking to you guys. You guys share a love and a passion of comics that I have, but I consider you guys pretty cool. But when do fans like me become annoying? What are your thoughts about people invading some of your personal time? If we see you out and about, or if we see you online at places like Facebook, I know when you guys are doing your cast and you're responding to emails and you're responding to voicemails like this, that's kind of your job, quote unquote. That comes expected. But what about if I'm running into you in an elevator at San Diego, or I see you pop online at Facebook or something like that? When does a guy like me become annoying? If you listen to my wife, she'd probably say all the time. But, I just kind of want your opinion on how we should handle ourselves when we do run into you guys, or if we run into some of our favorite artists, our writers, the stars that are at these conventions. I'm really enjoying your cast. Really enjoying the books that are coming out there. Really, really pumped for Blackest Night. I can't wait for that. And very, very interested to see what's going to happen with Superman and Batman this year. Anyways, thanks a lot, guys, and I'll be listening for your response. Take care.
Actually, it's interesting you should ask that, because I did have a situation in both Chicago and New York that I found to be really just, I don't know, and I think it's maybe time to just air this out there, I was laying down, I was asleep, and someone said, "Jim, tell me a story."
So I'm more your annoyance.
Yeah, you're more annoyance than I think people are. No, really?
You were like chomping at the bit when he said that. I'm like sitting around like, what is the joke? What is he going for here? So I'm the annoyance.
Yes,
That was funny. That was good.
No,
I didn't expect you to go there. That was funny.
All seriousness, we can't really speak for like the creators, but I know with you and me, we both are just like, you see us, hey Jim, oh hey Sean, hey, how you doing? Like that. It's that stuff is cool. It's just, you come up and you talk to people. I think with creators, because I've seen, just sometimes someone who they stay at the table too long. Like, oh yeah, and they're trying to make conversation. They're trying to, you can just kind of see it in the creator's eye, like, yeah, that was a great issue. I drew that, or something like that. So I can't really speak for creator side, but, with us, come on up, say, hey, just, if I'm in the bathroom, that maybe is a no. Just maybe. Depending on the circumstance. If we're both in the same...
What if I've got an eye river and I'm recording you?
Right. See, that's kind of a little annoying,
Again, just, you know what? If you really want to know what not to do, just follow me around when Jim and I go to a convention and see what I do to him. And that's probably your top 10 list of what not to do.
Yeah.
No, you know what? Honestly, the honest answer for us, and Jim's right, I can't speak for creators, but I think some of this might apply for them. For me, when I'm at a con, First of all, we don't always get a table. New York's the only place that we get a table. Otherwise, we're there as fans like you. I love hanging out with people chatting comics. I always feel bad when somebody will say something like, I didn't want to interrupt you guys or didn't want to talk to you guys. We love talking to anybody. So you guys are... We appreciate the fact that you guys listen on any level. You were saying before this is a job for us. It's really not. This is I'm a school teacher. That's my job. The podcast is my hobby. The comics are my hobby. Being able to talk to you guys, like this interaction right now with you giving in the voicemail, we are having a conversation here right now. I love this. Meeting you guys at cons. We're friends. That's the part that I really like. So is there... Just the only caution I would give people is if we're busy or doing something, it's not that we don't want to talk to you or blowing it. Like there's been times where people who have messaged me on Facebook and I've had to run off. And I'm always feeling like, am I sounding like I'm blowing this person off or something like that? It's really never the case. It's the fact that I'm a school teacher full time. I'm trying to get the show together. I've had a couple people who got mad at me on City of Heroes, for example. And this is just a great example of misunderstanding that they thought that I didn't want to talk to them or hang out with them on City of Heroes when really the issue was I'm never on City of Heroes. Jim, you know that. I pop on for a few minutes here or there. There's been times where I'm on City of Heroes and I'm editing the show in the background. So somebody could completely send me a message. I don't even see it because I'm in another window. When I come back, so much has gone on the screen, in those little windows, that I miss that somebody even messaged me. And it's really... it's time on the forum. I like to try to post there all I want to. So it's really just to be understanding that the podcast is like a full-time job in the sense time-wise, but it is a hobby otherwise. So I would say the only thing that ever has bothered me, and it's not in the sense that anybody upset me or anything, it's more so that I feel like people don't understand what's going on with me, is there's been a few times where people have gotten mad at me because they felt like I was blowing them off when it's never the case. Otherwise, at a con, if you see us, please stop by, hang out. If we're going to dinner or something like that, or if you're going to dinner or something, a lot of times when we're at a con, we have no clue what we're doing that evening. So if you got plans or something like that and you want to hang out and chit-chat comics in the evening, tell us. Because, I'm there to hang. I'm there to talk. I'm there to have a good time. I'm there with friends. And I consider our listeners friends. So is there really, if we have other plans that had already been scheduled because we ran into somebody else, it's not that we don't want to be with you. That's the case. If we're able to invite you, we more than likely will because we like doing that. It's not. So that's really kind of it. I don't really feel like I don't feel like anybody's ever stayed too long at our table. Which is, I think, a difference. I think creators, because they have a long line of people.
Yeah, creators.
I felt bad in New York, though, that there were people that came back multiple times to chat with us, and we were recording with somebody else at that point. I think it was just so busy. So that's the part where I think at New York, I would just say to people at convention, if we're busy, it's not because we don't like you. It's just because we're busy. It's never a personal thing. So I guess that would be the only thing I've ever been annoyed about, is more so that I felt bad when people have taken things as a personal affront that were never meant as personal affronts. Am I making sense?
Yeah, I think so.
Yeah, so that's kind of what that is. But that's just an honest answer. I think for the creator end of it, I think for the same thing, if you walk up to a creator and they look tired, be respectful of that. We don't run into this problem, in our way, because typically I'm there to record. So if you're coming down to Chit Chat Comics, I want to get you on the show and do that. In their case, though, they're there for a different purpose. They're signing all day long. It becomes a very long day for them. That is work. They genuinely want to see their fans, and you've got to understand that when a creator's there, they want to see and interact with fans. But by a certain point in time in the day, they're exhausted. And like any person that gets exhausted, understand that if a creator seems grouchy at that point in time, that it's probably not that they're grouchy at you. They're just grouchy because it's been a long day. And be respectful of that, and just kind of give some kind words. Don't give them 80 books at that point in time. Give them a couple, and just recognize, like, if the person's hand looks like it's about ready to fall off on the table, just kind of say, hey, could you sign this one book, please? I really appreciate it. And just be respectful of the fact that you had that moment with the creator. So I think that would be kind of my tip for creators. I think it's just really just understanding that nothing is ever meant as a personal affront on you or anybody else. It's really meant on, we're going to be like, if I'm at a convention, I'm going to be honest with people. If we're busy or something's going on, I'm just going to say that, but that doesn't mean that I don't want to chat with you another time or that we're not friends. So I guess that's kind of the case. I'm genuinely flattered. Like if somebody recognized me somewhere, I would be thrilled.
Yeah, I'd be shocked.
We had one of your wizards. Somebody recognized us by our voices. Our good friend, with the Silver Age. I'm drawing a blank at the moment. I so apologize. We had done the Silver Age discussion, and it was the first time you had ever read some Silver Age, and you disliked it at that point in time. It was your first exposure, and you since grew to have some love. Was it Greg, maybe?
Yes, okay, it was Greg.
Okay. And we were at Wizard World Chicago, and he recognized us from our voices. And we had such a wonderful conversation with him in line. It passed the time. And it was great to talk with somebody who has common interests. At a con, if you see us, please come up and say hello. If you've listened to our show for 5 minutes, I don't care if you're a regular listener, you listen every single week. If you listen for 5 minutes and you just happen to recognize us and you want to chit-chat comics, pop by and say hello. I want to do that. So that's kind of, this is an interesting question. So I think some of that applies to creators as well. I can't speak on that end because I'm not one, but, I think just from my own experience with creators, the thing of just respecting body language with creators, I think would be the thing to do. We're all, I think we need to remember that as fanboys, and we're the fanboy end. We're not the creator end. So, this type of thing, when you're there at conventions with us, we're one of you. So just pop by and say hello and pretend we're somebody else in line, because that's how we see ourselves, and that's how, we hope you'll see us too. But with creators, I think we sometimes need to all drop the fanboy sense and take the human side and just kind of take a look at them and take a look at body language and just say, this person's exhausted. They've had enough for today. Let me be respectful of that and walk up and just say, thank you for coming today. I know it's probably been a long day for you. I really appreciated this book. Sign it and don't give him 20.
I think that's the key.
I think that's for me. I think there's certain points in time where creators are willing to sign more because they've had a short session and they're more upbeat and ready to go at that point in time. But that would be my thing is etiquette-wise. Take a look at the creator and really kind of work off of body language. I think we're all pretty in tune to sense of that stuff. Cool question.
Hey, Sean and Jim. This is Jody. I don't post on the forums, but I'm a really big fan of the show. Just finished listening to 153. Due to technical glitch, I haven't listened to 152 yet. Hoping to fix that later. Things I'm raving about right now are Secret Six. Gotta love that book. It's just Gail Simone. I'm reading everything she's doing right now. Went back, got some of the old stuff, a lot of her Birds of Prey trades. Absolutely love it. Got on Secret Six when she did the Secret Six versus Birds of Prey. Been on it ever since. Also, Wonder Woman. Love the comic. Love the DVD. Just absolutely Wonder Woman happy right now. And you were talking about the Watchmen motion comic in 153. My roommate, not a comic reader, slowly converting him. And we sat down and watched the part of the motion comic before my DVD messed up. And he is really liking it. And I'm hoping to drag him to watch Watchmen with me again. See how that goes. Thanks for all the good work, and I'm going to keep on listening. Have a good day, guys.
Love to talk to anybody who's given some Gail Simone love.
Oh, yeah.
Her work is just awesome.
Yeah, I think people know our stance on it because it's, And
her Gus Beezer and Deadpool stuff is stuff I can recommend. It's really anything with her name on it. It's just wonderful. Simpsons stuff is a blast, too. I got a lot of those collections from my school book fair of all crazy things. They had Simpsons collections there. I'd never read her Simpsons stuff, and I started going through and grabbing that stuff a couple years ago and gradually getting it that way. With the motion comic, thank you so much for letting us know about... I'm particularly interested with motion comics and digital comics and stuff like that for people who aren't comic fans. And so I just need to see that he was drawn in from that. Actually, I might want to see if my wife is interested in watching the motion comic. I don't know. Now that she's seen the film, it's interesting. I don't know if she would be interested in seeing any of that, but I might try that out on her as well. That's my hope with these digital things. I don't think they're meant... I think ultimately... we as fans can enjoy them. I think very similar to my, analogy about audiobooks and things like that a little bit earlier in the show. But I do think that there is an audience there that can be hit with these. And if it's only a few people here and there, who can experience work that they haven't previously, I think it's a neat way to do it. So thanks for sharing that. Very cool. Appreciate your enthusiasm. Hey, everybody. In this spot, I had a voicemail from Mart. Mart's our good friend from over in the UK, and if you haven't checked out Mart's blog, definitely do so. He had a question that he called in, and the audio quality was really to the point where you couldn't hear it, especially when I played it back on the episode. So I wanted to make sure that we got his thoughts on here, and then I've still got Jim and Meyer's response to it. He was talking about the character of Leslie Tompkins and how we see her back in Batman now, and is she really a necessary character? And also, his contention was, and it was an interesting point, his contention was with the history of Batman, do we need a character like Leslie Tompkins in his history as a mother figure, considering the fact that Bruce is kind of special because of the fact that with his parents' death, he's kind of more of a loner and he had to be kind of a self-made man. So it's an interesting distinction that he was trying to share that perception, and then Jim and I got a chance to respond to it. And I apologize, Mart, if I'm misrepresenting anything that you said in there. We were trying to hear everything from your message, and it was kind of distorted. So now that I'm redoing this episode to kind of clean up some of our audio on it, this was a part when I was playing it back, we couldn't even hear you on it. So I wanted to make sure to get your point on this episode. If I'm misrepresenting you anyway, please email me or call in again, and let's try to get that fixed. But here's our response. That was from listener and friend of the show, Mart. He was experiencing, I know he's been experimenting with some audio on Skype. And I caught what he said. He was talking about Leslie Tompkins and how she's a character that he feels should be in Bruce's past. And his contention is that, and it's interesting, a distinction, he feels that with Leslie being introduced as somebody who Bruce grew up with, kind of like Alfred, that Batman works better as having grown up alone. And I guess a lot of my interest in Leslie Tompkins as a character comes from how he reacts to her now, and what she brings to the table now as like this giving old lady who is a medical practitioner who in many ways has chosen to be on the front lines versus she's smart enough as a doctor to be working at one of the finest hospitals in a very nice place doing a cushy job. But instead she chooses to be in this pit that is Gotham, trying to engage social change, trying to do something to better this city. So in many ways, she's a hero that Batman respects for the fact that she is choosing to be that person. I think she works when writers have something that they want to do with her. Sometimes that means that she does drift into the background, like Mart's saying. Other times, though, where she's in the forefront, like Gotham Gazette and things like that, where we're seeing with her, she's very useful as a character tool that we get to see the human element in Gotham, seeing people choosing to do that. I don't know. It's interesting to see that Bruce has kind of got this adoptive mother and father figure. It does show reasons why this driven, angry boy has a human side to him, too, which I do like. Sometimes Bruce gets too dark. And I don't necessarily want to see that. I want to see that part of him that every so often can connect with Tim and Dick and can connect with people because he's had some of these influences in his life. So I think Leslie works as kind of the softer side influence. I see his point, and I can understand where he's saying, Bruce works as kind of the loner growing up too. None of that was taken away. He did run away from Gotham. He did have those moments where he was driven by this horrible event that he witnessed. Remember, he's still scarred horribly by the fact that he saw his parents murdered in front of him. That is going to change anyone irreparably in many ways.
Yeah, that's something you don't recover from quickly.
Yeah. So what do you think? Now, that's my impression of her. You don't have the history with her that I do, though. Do you remember Batman the Animated Series?
Yeah.
She was in that series as well.
I remember
do you know her more from that?
Yeah, I know her more from that. I remember some of her usage when I read a little bit of Batman before, but not too much. Mm-hmm. With her coming back into thing, I'm actually kind of excited to see an addition to the whole Bat universe and like to see how, as you said, see how Bruce deals with her now. Especially, we learned that she didn't refuse to help Stephanie, when Spoiler was, when Spoiler was Robin.
Right.
That whole cleaning up of that storyline that just wouldn't fit her personality, wouldn't fit this caring doctor to turn her back on somebody. Right. So, I'm kind of excited to see what they're going to do with her.
I think what I would say is, I guess kind of my honest answer to that is, as with any supporting cast member, Vicky Vale's a great example of this. She's back now, too. I think if a writer has a use for the character and they're going to do something interesting and dynamic, the Daily Planet crew that's coming back right now is another great example. Good writers who have good uses for those characters, they should be in the forefront, they should be there, they should be utilized. If a writer doesn't have a good use that in some way is going to affect the storytelling in a way where they're more than window dressing, then they should be in the background. I think she's a character that can fade in and out nicely, depending on the character's need. She was on the shelf for a while. They got a use for her. They brought her back, and she'll, be interesting in that particular purpose. I think we're all going to, whether or not you connect with her is going to be the ultimate deciding factor on whether or not it was a good move to bring her back for you. And I think that no two fans are going to have the same opinion on that. So my opinion is I love her. I've always loved her. I think she's a great character. I'm glad she's back. If you disagree with that, then you're not going to feel the same way I do about it. But maybe the writers will change your mind, and maybe what they're going to do with her will be something where you'll be like, wow, for the first time I'm really digging this character. She's really fitting into my reading routine. I think that's going to change from writer to writer and story to story as far as whether or not it connects with you in any way that's relevant or important to you.
She could be your Etta Candy. I hated Etta before, but I absolutely love her now. And it's based
and I
solely
always
on
liked her. So
and it's based based solely on the writer's usage of the character. So who knows what's going to happen?
Yeah, that's actually a great example, because when you and I first talked Etta Candy, you had a major disdain for her, whereas I loved her. I thought she was a great character. So it was an interesting little distinction between us. But that's a perfect example of this situation. So. Interesting to see that, Mark. Thanks a lot for calling, pal, and that's it for voicemails this week.
Holy caffeine!
Want to remind everyone to check out Lords of Justice, and there are going to be links right in the show notes to check out that particular book and purchase it and support our sponsor. Want to remind everyone to check out dcbservice.com and instocktrades.com, where you can pick up Flash Rebirth number 2 of 5, regularly $2.99, 40% off, only $1.79. It's $15. The Comics Podcast Companion, which is $9.57. Whatever your shipping preferences, bag and boarding preferences, dcbservice.com accommodates your collecting needs. Don't forget to check out In Stock Trades for our contest, ragingcontest@gmail.com. We want your website content, articles, reviews, Where's What Not Nows, comic strips, banners, fan art, really any creative idea that you can come up with. Grand prize, you pick the segment we do on the show, and we do it cover to cover with you. So we'll be glad to have you join us on the show to really tackle a book. We love that kind of stuff. Actually, going back to that voicemail, do we ever have a problem with listeners at cons or anywhere else? No. We love you guys. You add something to the dynamic. We love chatting with you. So this is a great example of that. InStockTrades.com offers free shipping on $50 or more and has a ton of collected editions in stock and ready to ship. Thank you for supporting us, DCBService.com and InStockTrades.com. Actually, back to that last segment, I want to mention once again, Lords of Justice is available at Amazon.com, BarnesandNoble.com, and CyberWizardProductions.com. I also forgot to mention at the beginning, it's also available at www.KevinGSummers.com, the website of one of the creators of Lords of Justice. So definitely check that particular book out, and we'll be chatting more about that next week in our ads. So it is all in the show notes, so you can just directly link onto it. Next week, Jim, Watchmen Part 2, and more Speeding Bullets. There's been a lot of books that you and I haven't had a chance to talk about in a while, and this is a great chance for us to do that. Then we'll jump into the 2-part interview with Art Lyon. I'm actually delaying that till after the Watchmen, and my decision was it's just been solicited that in next month's previews, it's going to be that Brave and the Bold trade is going to be listed. So it's a great time to release that interview with Art Lyon, to tell people why they should make the decision to purchase that if they haven't already read it. And it's a great chance for people who already read those issues to reminisce about that story. So we'll be chatting more about that right after the Watchmen one. We'll do that in a 2-part segment, similar to what we've been doing right now. So that's the reason that drove that decision. I had no idea the Watchmen segment was going to turn out to be this in-depth. I should have known, because usually when we plan for it not to be, it turns out to be. So next time I think we ought to plan for it to be like a 14-part segment, and it'll be like a half an hour. That's kind of the way that things work out with us. But I hope you guys really enjoyed this one. We put a lot of effort into this one and really wanted to delve into this particular book. So We will see you next week. Oh, and one more quick reminder. At the end of the episode, there's more of the New York Comic Con content. We had a number of interviews that we did with people that are a little bit outside D.C. that we'll keep sharing every week until we exhaust them. So more New York Comic Con stuff. Jim?
Bye.
All right.
Alrighty, and we are joined with Sean Wang. He is the writer, artist, the creator of this really cool-looking series called Runners. Actually, why don't you just tell us a little bit about it? Maybe where this thing came from, how the birth of it was.
Sure. Actually, the genesis was back in probably the early '90s. I ended up at the time, there was really no book like it and I really wanted to read a fun sci-fi action comedy. And since there's nothing out there, I'm like, all right, I'll make my own. So basically, it's a series about a group of alien smugglers, and they're constantly on the run and trying to do these jobs, and they run into a lot of ethical dilemmas. Oddly enough, I think the first issue came out the same year as Firefly premiered. So since then, it's actually been an easier sell in terms of I can actually mention it's gotten like a lot of really favorable comparisons to both Star Wars and Firefly, because those two kind of are very similar in tone to what I was doing with Runners.
And sci-fi is kind of making a nice comeback, and it's one of those genres that personally I love the sci-fi genre, and just the whole. I was a huge Firefly fan, and just it's something that you can. A lot of times people will get so bogged down with special effects in TVs and movies that they forget that behind the basis of a sci-fi or behind the basis of an alien is a cool story of interactions, whether they have freaky foreheads with big teeth or whether they look like you and me. They are still just a humanistic reaction between people.
Yeah, I agree. And it's one of those things where I think the one thing I found with a lot of sci-fi, and especially in comics, which I found the most unusual was it was always still a lot of sci-fi was humans in space. Yeah, I figure, all right, with live action, you've got to have human actors. I can understand that with Star Trek and Star Wars, or a lot of Star Wars anyway. But with comics, it's like free reign to go nuts, which is why pretty much the entire cast is all aliens. There's maybe like one human in it, and he's kind of like a secondary character, whereas I think a lot of other people who have read Runners have picked up on the fact that in other books, your human character would be the leader.
Right.
And this, he's just kind of like, the new guy in the group, and he's just kind of along for the ride. But I basically wanted, as a comic, to visually go kind of nuts with the sci-fi aspect and have like a lot of really cool aliens, a lot of really cool ships.
Oh, that's nice, man. You mentioned how this originally came out in 2005, so now you're kind of like a relaunch, if you will, of the story, and you're bringing it back. The next, this volume looks really cool, nice black and white. You're going to do the next one, you're doing it in color, correct?
Yep. Actually, that series, the collected volume, as you're saying, came out in 2005, and this year I'm actually looking to relaunch the entire series as a free online webcomic. So I'm really excited about that. And basically, it seems like people who have picked up the book have really loved it, but it seems like most people still don't really know about it. So I'm trying to do what I can to get it out just in front of as many eyes as possible. With the hope that, they'll check it out and really like it and then go back to their stores and buy the collected volumes. But basically, the whole entire first story, which is Runner's Bad Goods, is going to go online as a free webcomic later this month in February.
Okay, cool.
And then it's going to be followed shortly after with the new series, which is going to be in full color.
Nice. Now, do we have the setup where they can get this, or maybe where they can start seeing the webcomic?
Yeah, the original book, Runner's Bad Goods, it is in the Diamond system.
Okay.
I don't know what the code is off my head, but that information is going to be on my website, which is SeanWang.com, SeanWang.com. You can also buy the book from my store, which is on my website.
Okay, and we'll have all these websites loaded in with the links for this show. So if anybody's listening right now, you don't have to bother writing down. We'll have it already there for you. We have a nice section on our website. It's friends of the show and links, and we'll have these links in there as well.
Awesome.
So if you said you have your shop, your store has a site.
On my website, there's a store section where you could buy that, or there are some Tick issues that I actually got my start working on the Tick series for New England Comics, and did a book for Image called Meltdown a couple years ago. So all those are pretty much on the store.
Okay, cool. Now here I'm a little bit of a control freak, and the guy I normally do the show with, who you didn't get a chance to meet, whose name is Sean, by the way.
Oh, okay.
He spells it the same way.
Remember.
Yeah, he spells it the correct way, like how you spell it as well. We're both kind of a little bit of a control freak side, and I got to tell you, it's got to be probably cool to sit there and you're the writer, you're the artist, you got all this control. This is your universe. This is your baby.
Yeah, it is. I have to say, I do love that. That's one thing. I loved working on the Tick, and it was actually a lot of fun when I started working on that, especially the Tick and Arthur series that I did. But it's still one of those things where you feel like it's still someone else's creation, and you still have to run things by, the publishers. And for the most part, they're always okay with whatever I wanted to do with the character, which was very cool.
Yeah.
But it's like a whole nother ball game doing runners, because I can pretty much, if I want to kill off a character, I don't have to run that by anyone. I haven't yet, but we'll see. But yeah, it's actually, I'm also a big control freak myself, so it is nice to be able to really have full creative control over every aspect of it. And actually that's one thing I love about, the whole comics medium and as a whole, especially for small press people, you can pretty much, it's the only medium I can think of where a single creator can, put out an entire story undiluted in any form and just realize his original vision without a whole lot of tinkering from outside forces.
Oh, cool. Yeah, it's kind of a nice, just opened up there. You have your set universe that you can build on, and you have the stuff. And it's now when you're doing this, one thing I always wondered when you're creating a whole universe, did you lay out like a game plan? Like, this is what I want the universe to be. How are you actually building a whole universe?
Yeah, I did. I'm actually, when you read the book or look at the book, it'll be obvious that I'm a big Star Wars fan. But what's maybe not so obvious is I'm also a huge Lord of the Rings fan. I'm a big fan of epic storytelling. So this was always intended to be a big epic story, and I like the approach that Jeff Smith did with Bone, where the first story arc is kind of like a very light introduction. It's not really heavy-handed in like the big mythology. You're kind of just eased into this world, and then he kind of backdoors in this epic story. So that's kind of what I'm doing with this, where the first story is intentionally kind of light and just kind of a fun adventure romp, but I actually didn't have this big epic story planned out, and a lot of time and effort kind of went into planning out a lot of the universe beforehand. It's one of those things where half of me, I want to plan out half of it, and the other half I like to organically let it develop from each story.
Oh, cool, man. I tell you, as you're saying with the Star Wars and with the Lord of the Rings, I'm like, oh, this is going to be kind of neat. I haven't had a chance to read it because we just saw it, but I was able to page through, and there's some really cool looking stuff. It has it nice. It's got a fun art to it.
Yeah.
And I don't want fun people to think that I'm like it's a negative thing. It's a positive thing. It's I was reading it, I was like, oh, okay, yeah, this looks like something I can sit down, I can enjoy. It's kind of that recharger, if you will.
Yeah.
Where you're kind of get a nice energy off of it.
Yeah, that's one of the things I wanted it to have, kind of the feel of the original Star Wars movies, where it's not so much like sci-fi, like heavy on the science, heavy on dilithium crystals and inverse tachyon pulses. As much as I love Star Trek, I want it to be more of like a space adventure.
Yeah.
So that's kind of the feel that I'm going for.
Cool, Lynn. Once again, your website is
SeanWang.com.
SeanWang.com, and we'll definitely have the links for this. Looking forward to seeing the next volume. Do you know when it's going to be coming out anytime soon?
The original book is going to be posted starting later this month, February. And then as soon as that's done, that's around like 150 pages, the original Bad Good storyline. And the new story, which is The Big Snow Job, is going to follow immediately after that. So it should be around summertime, I think.
Okay, cool.
I think on my website I'll have, once I actually crunch the numbers and do the math, I'll be able to figure out, when specifically the new series will be posted.
Okay, well, definitely looking forward to reading this. Gonna, start checking out the webcomics, which is just a really cool venue. I liked seeing that type of stuff because I know there's been a couple webcomics where I've, just started getting into them. And went out and I bought, the collect and trade, because the webcomic is nice to see it because you get a taste of it.
Right.
But there's something about actually holding the book. And you go back and read.
I'm old school. I definitely.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
My preference is to have something in the hand. This is for me. It's like I kind of think of it as a great way to just get it out in front of a lot of people. And for me, I'm the kind of person where if I like what I see, I will eventually go and buy the graphic novel because I want some for my bookshelf also.
Amen. Well, thank you for being on the show.
Thanks for having me.
Look forward to reading this.
Awesome. Thanks.
Thank you.